the regular board meeting of the Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility District scheduled for Saturday, October 11th, 2014, and the time is 8 a.m. With that, I'll call the meeting to order. Michael, do you have some announcements?
Welcome to the Kirkwood Meadows PUD regular board meeting. This board meeting is fed live over the internet, and the public can view this meeting by going to KMPUD.com and following the appropriate link. If the public would like to ask a question, please email msharp@kmpud.com and the board will respond. I would like to acknowledge that Dave Wrightley, our electrical engineer, is in the audience today, as well as eventually Howard Barnes, our Russ consultant, will be on the telephone line. Howard, are you there? Eventually.
Yes, I am.
Oh,
Thank Michael.
yes,
Welcome, Howard.
I'll hang up.
So with that, we'll go to item
Has
3.
left the conference.
Peter, would you please call the roll?
Sure. Rickard? Here. Andy? Here. O'Grady?
Here.
Norfolk here, and Epstein?
Here.
Okay, full board.
Item number 4 is oral communications public input. This is the opportunity for members of the public to address the board on non-agenda items relating to district business. No action can be taken by the board on matters not appearing on the agenda. Nancy?
Nancy Trevette, Westside Homeowner. I just have a question, although it is on your agenda, it's under your consent agenda regarding shutoffs. I was wondering if at some point during the meeting someone could comment on what kind of trends, if any, you're seeing in those. And then later on, when you address in the public hearing, what kind of impact, if any, those shutoffs have on rates. Thank you.
Is it appropriate to comment now?
Well, we can either comment now or comment during the administrations when Jill is doing financials. She could definitely
Let's do that.
comment on receivable trends, if that makes sense. And then during the public comment period, any questions can be asked and addressed. So I don't believe that this inhibits the board from approving the consent agenda.
Okay. Any other public input? So item 5 is corrections to the agenda or consent calendar. Michael, do you have any corrections to the agenda?
Yeah, staff requests to take board items 8D through 8F first, and then resume the meeting in the normal order. That'll allow us to hear from our Russ consultant, Howard Barnes, at the first part of this meeting.
Great. Any other corrections? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the consent calendar.
I'll move to adopt the consent calendar.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. So we'll move to item 8D, which is on the second page of the agenda. And first we're going to have a first you're going to make a presentation on 8D, E, and F with Howard. Is that right?
That is correct. So with the change in source of electric power from Powerhouse to Mount Valley, the need to change the structure of our rates comes into play. The district needs to eliminate our fuel adjustment charge, which we use for diesel costs. The Out Valley project impacts on the electric rates is that we will eliminate the fuel adjustment charge, we'll actually reduce Powerhouse operations and maintenance expenses, we'll add in a power purchase expense from Shell Energy, we'll increase our debt service expense, and we'll include Out Valley operations and maintenance into our rates. Going into a all-in charge, basically trading diesel costs with debt service and power purchase. The Finance Committee requested that Howard Barnes, our U.S. consultant, update our electrical financial forecast in lieu of this change. As you will recall, the original financial forecast was completed in support of the A8 loan, and then it was updated in support of the B8 loan. Now Howard is here to present the update based on actual results of the last 2 years and updated assumptions. So with that, I'll turn it over to Howard Barnes. Howard?
Thanks, Michael. Greatly appreciate Good morning to everyone. It's great to talk with you just before the completion of the Out Valley project. I've certainly enjoyed working with you all over the last several years. I'm on the slide which says updated financial analysis. Are you there, Michael?
I am.
Excellent. Certainly, thanks are in order to Michael and Jill for assisting me in the update of your financial analysis with the most recent assumption and cost. There are a number of them which are key to the results and will be discussed this morning. This financial analysis was in fact utilized in determining the extent of the needed electric rate adjustments being discussed today. So we'll talk about those assumptions and show you graphically what those results are. Next slide. Among the key assumptions are we used the actual cost to complete the Out Valley project based on contract costs, change orders, etc., including inter-stirring construction, which is capitalized along with the direct construction costs until the project is completed. This inter-stirring construction cost of $1.1 million of the $37.6 million, along with $2.7 million of initial studies and environmental work, constitutes the Out Valley project. We've also updated and revised the PG&E ITCC cost to $1,080,228. Next slide. In this first paragraph, I've identified the key project components of the Out Valley project. I'm sure you're all very familiar with those project components. An additional one, however, is one that's currently being discussed, is the need to install a switching station at Bear River Reservoir if the district assumes ownership of the 1.3-mile overhead portion of the Out Valley project. For purposes of the financial analysis, this project has been reflected as an additional $2 million expenditure in the years 2015 through 18, financed with the district's general funds. Next slide. At the time that this analysis was prepared, all but $2.75 million of the $58 million, which constitute the A and the B loan, had been drawn from RUS. The composite interest rates for all of these FFE advances is just a hair above 3%, 3.005%. In order to determine calendar year 2014 results, we utilized actual costs for all expense categories through June of this year, June 2014, and utilized the fiscal year budget for the remainder of this calendar year, 2014. PG&E ownership costs are now being reflected on a monthly basis in the financial analysis, equal to $11,250 as of November 1st, which is compared with values as high as $36,577 earlier, based upon discussions with PG&E as to ownership responsibilities. Now, this, as you know, it relates to the $2 million Bear River switching station mentioned earlier. Upon completion of this switch station in 2019, we're reflecting PG&E annual costs soon to be reduced from $135,000 to $35,000. We've taken and projected future expenses using 2014 costs, along with a 2% escalation value thereafter, unless not appropriate to do so. For example, we're reflecting powerhouse O&M costs being reduced from $431,000 to $294,000 upon completion of Out Valley, at which time the powerhouse will be used only in a standby mode. Next slide. One of the key unknowns at this time is to what extent RUS will approve a reduction of the depreciation expense of the powerhouse, which is currently being depreciated at a rate of 7%, and when this will be approved. We've assumed that the 3.5% rate will be approved by RUS by January 1st of 2015. However, information submitted to RUS reflects a rate of between 2.009% and 2.264% being requested. I'd like to point out that each 1% reduction in depreciation rate for the powerhouse translates to about a 1.9% reduction in overall rates for the district. Now, I'll talk more about this depreciation aspect later, but it's a key assumption and a key to the need for the rate increase that is currently being discussed. We've reflected wholesale power costs of 7.25 cents per kilowatt hour beginning November 2014 upon completion of Out Valley, including renewable energy credits, which is held flat until the year 2019, at which time it's escalated thereafter 2% annually. Michael, would you like to discuss further the assumption as to this future power cost and why we've used that assumption?
That assumption originally came from Cornerstone Consulting and has been confirmed through negotiations with Shell Energy. We actually have a hedging strategy for the first 3 years of the period already in place, and we've already put that into motion. So that begins in January, and we'll be looking at that upon future years, but we just felt that this was a safe way to go at this point.
Thanks, Michael. Low growth assumptions are key to the results that have been projected. Due to mild weather and lower historical usage, along with Vail not expanding the resort as quickly as originally projected, we're now utilizing lower projections for future years based upon growing the projected calendar year 2014 usage by 2%. And I'll include a graphical analysis of this reduction compared to these earlier projections later in the presentation. But I want to point out that kilowatt-hour load growth is key to the findings of this analysis, as well as depreciation associated with the powerhouse. Next slide. Three forecasts have been prepared, two of which were done historically, and the one that we're talking about today we're calling Go Live, as Michael indicated. And the three forecasts, the A8 loan was prepared in March 2012. The B8 supplemental loan was prepared in November 2013, and we have the current Go Live projection. And what I want to talk about, first of all, is the key assumptions used in these three scenarios, and then we'll analyze them graphically. Next slide. Key assumptions used in the A8 loan in March 2012 when the district submitted the $50 million loan was assuming that the interest rates on the $50 million could be as low as 3.5%, even though RUS asked that it be analyzed at 5.5% for purposes of the feasibility. We also used at that time base case load forecast, which increased from 7.5 million kilowatt hours in 2014 to 9.2 million in 2020. We'll look at that graphically. The Out Valley project was assumed to be available November 2014 with wholesale power costs beginning at 7.5 cents per kilowatt hour, which were escalated 2% yearly beginning in 2016. So at that time, we were using a slightly higher wholesale power cost assumption. Powerhouse was assumed to be depreciated at 7% in all future years, rather than reducing it at any time during the next couple of years. We've also, at that time, reflected prepayment of debt to the extent cash was available over $500,000, and we allowed rate reductions when the tier of 1.05 was exceeded in those forecasts, in that original A8 forecast. Next slide. The key assumptions of the B8 loan was at the time in November 2013 when an additional $8 million loan request was made to RUS. At that point, we used the actual interest rates for all advances that had been made in 2013, and we assumed that the advances in 2014 would be at a rate of about 3.5%. We modified very slightly the base case load projections to reflect KMPUD own use amount, which I'll show you graphically in a moment. At that time, we were hopeful that Out Valley wholesale power costs would be about 6.84 cents per kilowatt hour in 2015, escalated at 2% yearly. That subsequently has gone up from 6.84 to 7.25, as Michael has indicated. We did assume the powerhouse project would be depreciated 7% until April 2015, at which time we would decrease it to 3.5% thereafter. Once again, paying cash, using available cash to repay debt over $500,000, and lowering rates to have a minimum tier of 1.05 was used. The next slide is our go live forecast assumptions, some of which we've already talked about just previously, but I want to reinforce them once again, what we used in this forecast. We used the actual interest rates with the exception of a very small amount of $2.75 million, which had not been advanced when I prepared this analysis. The composite rate was 3.005%. We reduced the kilowatt hour projections for kilowatt hours from the original base case and used the projected 2014 usage of 6.5 million, escalating at a rate of 2% to 7.3 million in 2020 and 7.6 million in 2022. We're using, as I mentioned, wholesale power costs projected at 7.25 cents, held flat until 2020, at which time it's escalated 2% yearly. We've lowered using lower PG&E monthly power ownership costs of $11,250 compared with a value as high as $36,578 at the time the V8 was submitted. And then we reduced that to 2009-17 monthly beginning 2019. We're assuming the powerhouse is being depreciated at 7% beginning January 2015, at which time the rate is decreased to 3.5% thereafter. We're installing the $2 million Bear River switching station in 2015-18, financed with general funds rather than loan funds, and same assumptions on available cash and tier. Next slide. This slide represents three scenarios as far as kilowatt hour sales. The difference between the red line, A8, and the B8 loan represents the very small amount of own use that was assumed to be a different amount between the base case and when we prepared the B8 loan. What you see dramatically is our lower assumption with regard to kilowatt hour assumptions for future years. I do want to show you how that compares graphically with earlier projections, which I will do in the next slide. But I want to key in on the fact that we are using a much lower, more conservative assumption with regard to kilowatt hour assumptions for kilowatt hour sales in this go live forecast. Next slide. To show you how dramatic this is, this slide here compares the historic usage through 2013, and if you look at the go live 13, the first dot that you see on that blue last line is the value, the actual value for 2013. The second dot that you see for that lowest line is the value projected for 2014 with a 2% escalation thereafter. That top line, KMR, is what KMR identified as what they thought could potentially be the load development upon Vail acquiring the assets. The modified base case and low growth scenarios were all different variations of how much the Vail resort would grow. The Vail, because of the Vail ownership, what Kirkwood would change as far as load development within with regard to lifts, et cetera. So what you're seeing is substantially larger kilowatt hour projections with that earlier projections for development of the resort. And then the pre-Vail development was what we thought at that time would be the growth, even without Vail being involved with Kirkwood Resort. So I want to show you how dramatic this is in this graph as far as our load assumption. Should future growth be more than what we are now currently assuming would go live, there will be, as you would expect, a representative decrease in rates thereafter. And I will show you that impact here in a moment. Next slide. See, what I've done in this all-in rate is to take the average rate per kilowatt hour sold in the A8, B8, and Go Live forecast, with Go Live being using two different assumptions with regard to kilowatt hours. One with the current updated lower load projection, and one, this purple one, being had we used the original base case load projection what the current low go-live costs would represent. So what we're seeing here in this graph is not just the energy rate of 68 cents, which is being discussed, but an all-in rate, including base rates, energy rates, and meter charges. So the 2013 represents the actual value. The 2014 is what the composite will be. This green will be at 68.003, including the projected rate increase November 1st for the entire year with all rate components. And then you'll see what the effect will be under load development being go live, the green versus the purple. Are there any questions on this graph? Because I don't want to go further if there's any questions on this specific graph.
I think the only question that I have, Howard, is there seems to be a small difference between the public hearing notice and this graph. And that is the public hearing notice indicating 68 cents is exclusive of the base rate of $21 a month. And this is inclusive of that rate, of that amount. And I was assuming that's because...
That's correct.
I'm assuming that's because the
Yeah,
depreciation of the
what is it?
powerhouse hasn't...
Calendar 14, okay, for calendar 14, there's really 3 rate periods involved. You had a rate period through June 30th, you had a rate adjustment July 1st, and then you're talking about a rate adjustment at the beginning November 1st. But this is an all-in rate for calendar year 14, including for the last 2 months, a energy rate of 68 cents, and along with base rates and meter charges. But the overall composite for the calendar year would be 68.0033 with the projected rate of 68 for energy beginning November 1st.
Okay, I understand. Thanks.
Still confusing, or can I clarify further?
No, I now understand it. It takes from January through December as opposed to just starting in November.
That's right.
Exactly. This is a calendar year analysis, exactly,
Okay.
using 3 rate periods and using the last rate period with the projected rate increase that's being discussed today.
Just
So,
one other comment in regards to this. The Finance Committee looked at this both ways and felt that comparing it to the other 2 charts, having an apples-to-apples comparison was important to understand historically, and then to separate out to see how the rate actually works with the other components. So we asked for it to be done this way to accurately reflect things.
Michael will comment on it further later.
Okay.
Yeah.
we do have a slide of that just later, and I appreciate Bob making that point, because when you separate out just the energy-only rate, that will be clear in a subsequent graph. Next graph, next slide, is power costs under the 3 scenarios. You can see that we assume the highest power cost for power purchase on the A8. The time of the B8, we were assuming it would start lower, but it would go a little higher than the go live scenario. But the green is what we're currently predicting for the go live wholesale power purchases, including REC, beginning November 1st, 2014. Next slide. Next slide represents system losses. System losses are a combination of losses from at the powerhouse currently involving transformation, stepping it up from, I believe it's 480 volts to 72125, as well as losses within the electric system of distribution system of Kirkwood, and they also involve the system losses associated with the Out Valley project upon completion, including transformation to step down from 34.5 kV down to distribution voltage. So this represents the variation of what we assume for system losses. We work with Dave Riley to hopefully develop the correct assumptions with regard to losses. And I feel comfortable with what we're predicting with system losses. And it's not a huge percentage as far as what the effect is on results, like the reduction in kilowatt-hour losses, the sales, or the depreciation, but I do want to point out what we've assumed now. The next, I think, is kind of interesting is the interest expense. The next slide is interest expense under the 3 scenarios. What you're going to see is the current go-live values for interest expense are lower than what they were for A8 and B8 with actual interest rates. And what's noteworthy is that we're using projected project costs of $58 million plus the $2 million financed with general funds, compared with $50 million originally used with the A8 loan. So it's interesting to note that go live interest expense, because of your ability to use less expensive money and ladder some of the last advances for shorter term repricing, have been very favorable for you. So I think it's noteworthy what the interest expense projection is. Next slide is depreciation expense. As I mentioned earlier, on the A8 loan, we assumed the powerhouse would be depreciated at 7% throughout its entire future years. The difference between the green and the red, i.e. the go live and the B8, is the additional depreciation associated with the $2 million Bear River switching station beginning 2019. So that is a slightly higher depreciation expense. Actually, I depreciated even begin before that, beginning in the year 2017. The next slide is graph represents all costs other than interest expense, depreciation, and power purchase costs, but does include powerhouse O&M costs excluding fuel. And the key difference between the B8 and the go live is the reduced PG&E ownership costs, which I mentioned earlier. So the key difference between that red B8 and go live is the reduction in PG&E ownership costs that you've been able to have a discussion with PG&E concerning the reduction of that. So that's key to this results. Next slide is, as Bob mentioned, the Finance Committee was very interested in seeing what the energy-only portion of rates would be, not including the base rates and the meter charges. So what I've shown there in 2013 is what the actual rate was for the year was 58 cents. The 2014 will be 64.61 for the entire year, including all three rate periods, including a 68 rate for the last 2 months. And then 2015 would be at a rate of 68 cents if the district is unable to take any rate reduction from what the rate increase will be. I will tell you that we've assumed in using a 68 cents in the 2015 rate that RUS would not approve reducing the 7% powerhouse depreciation rate until after 2015. So if they are able to do it during 15, you'd be able to have the rate reduction that I showed there, 60.8 cents, or if you were able to increase sales, which are to the full amount of the original base case, they could have been as low as 50 cents. But I think the key numbers to look at are 68 cents for 2015 compared with 60.8 cents with rate reduction by having RUS approve a rate reduction on depreciation, reducing it from 7% to 3.5% beginning January 1st, 2015. So what that green represents is RUS approving a rate reduction on the depreciation from powerhouse, reducing it from 7% to 3.5%. I would point out that I think there is at least a good likelihood that RUS will approve some decrease beyond 3.5%, and that is possible. The study that was presented to RUS used rates as low as 2% and 2.26% that Dave Rackley from Exponential prepared.
Okay, Howard, this is Howard.
Any question?
Yeah,
Yes.
Howard, this is Eric. So this is a key question I have, and I'm a little confused. The 68 cents that's in our public hearing notice is based on depreciation of 7% at the powerhouse, not the 3.5% that's in this analysis. Okay.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay. And you think there's a good probability that Russ will approve some decrease, we don't know how far, 3.5, 3, 2.5, sometime in this in calendar year 2015?
Correct.
The key is when it will happen. It's a question of when, not if, and to what extent. It could be as low as a rate reduction down to a depreciation rate of 2%. That would represent a 9.5-cent reduction from what the rates are currently. So I tell you, if RUS approved the minimum reduction, the minimum depreciation rate, it would represent 9.5 cents lower than what it currently is. If they approve the 3.5 that's used in the forecast, it would represent a 6.67% or 6.6 cent decrease from the 68 cents that you currently are showing. So it's anywhere from possibly 6.67 cents to as much as 9.5-cent reduction that could be potentially taken upon RUS approval. I will talk about rate reductions in the future, but one of the possibilities is as soon as RUS would approve the rate reduction, that would be a known and measurable item for which rate reduction possibly could be implemented as soon as RUS would approve it. So that's a possible option, and I will tell you about another one that could be done in the next slide.
Okay, thanks, Howard.
Sure. There's opportunity for rate refund and rebate at the end of a year in any, on the next slide. I hope Michael, you're on that one.
Yes, sir.
Great, thanks. As I mentioned, there's opportunity for rate refund and rebate at the end of future years. The board might consider implementing a rate reduction or rebate at the end of future years should actual results for the first 11 months of each calendar year allow this based upon the level of margins achieved relative to the mortgage. And as you know, a tier of 1.05 is required by RUSs, which is calculated by adding net margins to interest expense and then dividing that sum by interest expense. That refund could be done in the month of December of, say, 2015, for example, in which the margins are projected to exceed mortgage requirements. That refund could be based upon usage in the previous 11 months, along with projected usage in that final month of the year. But another available option is, because of the magnitude of the depreciation expense associated with the powerhouse, another opportunity would be to reduce rates upon approval by RUS if it was greater than what we're even currently predicting. So I want to throw that out as an available option. Just as you're taking rate increase November 1st, rate reductions could be taken once RUS approves depreciation changes as such. One of the key things with regard to depreciation that RUS recognizes is it is a non-cash item based upon amortizing the asset over its anticipated useful life. What RUS doesn't want to have to force you to do is depreciate an asset more quickly than what would be required to do. I've had discussions with both the finance and the engineering staff. They are very supportive of reduction of the depreciation expense from what it currently is. Bob Benson, the RUS consultant with regard to auditing matters, has been in discussion with the accounting people, which will ultimately approve this. It's a key of when it will be done and to what extent will be done, but it's key to what your rates will need to be going forward. Are there any questions about this opportunity for rate refund or rebate at year-end, or a possible reduction once the depreciation rate is approved by RUS?
I guess the timeline for RUS contemplating the issue is not clear to me.
Well,
Well, I would say that, go ahead. Michael, do you want to address or do you want me to?
Well, we have sent in our request to RUS, and we're expecting an accelerated review by our RUS, and Bob Benson, our RUS accounting consultant, has anticipated that they could make a decision, and this could be to effect as early as January of 2015. So the go-live forecast that Howard's been describing predicts a 3.5% depreciation schedule effective January of 2015.
questions? Or why don't we continue, Howard, please?
Yeah, I'm actually at the end of my presentation, unless there's questions that I could address. What the key was to give the board and membership of Kirkwood an idea of what the rates could be into the future. The keys are going to be, as I mentioned, kilowatt or load growth, as well as when depreciation expense associated with the powerhouse will be reduced. Most other expenses are fairly well tied down and I think are fairly definable. The keys are going to be how quickly load development will occur and when this depreciation reduction will occur.
I guess that just procedurally, the one question I have is, I'm assuming that because of the RUS requirements of the 1.05 tier ratio and what we need to cover with our revenues, is we do not have an option in front of us that says we can rely on some other source of funds to bridge the next 2, 3, 4 months until we get this rate, this depreciation decrease, right? We can't say, we believe that the real rate for the bulk of 2015 will be 61 cents or whatever it is. And therefore, we won't increase the rate to 68 cents now. We're going to bridge that somehow. We don't have that option.
I can address that during my presentation if you'd like.
Okay.
Is it appropriate to open up the audience to see if they have any questions on Howard's? Any questions from the audience on Howard Barnes' presentation?
I guess I have a question for the Finance Committee. Now, you've stated that the additional $2 million for the switch station is going to be paid by general funds.
Well, Howard said general funds, it's excess cash from electric operations. Right.
So
That's where it's coming from.
From revenues.
It's from electric generation revenues, right?
So the rates will affect.
It's already reflected in the rates. It's just that
Okay.
because we have to, our margins have to be 5% higher than the interest
So you're
rates.
saying
that
the tier
generates
ratio
cash.
is going to cover that?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
That's right. Because of our requirements for the mortgage, for the loan,
Right.
we have to run the electric operation at a surplus cash.
Right.
The surplus cash for the first 3 years will be there as backup for unexpected things and to pay for up to $2 million for the switch station. After that, it reverts to paying down debt.
And we're pretty comfortable with that $2 million
It's
estimate for the switch station.
I
As
think
long as
it's
it
a do
snows.
not exceed, right?
Yeah, we don't know what the cost
Sure.
of the Salt Spring switch station is.
You feel that's a comfortable estimate?
I feel that's a comfortable
Okay.
estimate.
Excuse me one second. Looking for a rate from the utilities?
Excuse me?
A rate from the utilities?
Randy?
Sorry.
So Spanish, I've got a question. I don't know what meeting it was, but I think it was Eric brought up, the thinking about charging some kind of fee, connection fee,
It's a buy-in fee is what I call it.
buy-in fee, and I realize that's going to be, addressed sometime in the future. So if that did get approved and that went into effect, wouldn't that money have some impact on rates also, potentially?
Certainly.
Okay.
Well, let me just say that we would use that for capital purchases, but it would never be considered revenue. So for the purpose of meeting our debt service, it has to be revenue. There's exactly 2 sources, the rates or property taxes. There are no other sources. So that money, if and when it arrives, could be used to possibly pay down debt sooner, but it would have no short-term effect on rates. I mean, it would have effect 3 to 5 years later.
It's a good point. First of all, in terms of rates set by revenue, but to your point, Peter, the other second source of cash for the switch station is our $3.2 million reserve fund.
Okay.
Potentially. So I think if we get through this year and have sensible rates and it snows a reasonable amount, we should be able to pay for that switch station without any problem.
Okay.
Right.
Any other questions or comments?
I would just
Cheryl.
like, oh, I'm sorry.
I'd just like to thank Howard and the Finance Committee for a really clear presentation of the facts, so thank you.
It's exactly what I was gonna say. I mean, that was,
Great
Howard
minds
is,
think
Howard
alike.
is as amazing as ever. Thanks, Howard.
Michael, you want to continue?
Before the board today is ordinance 14-06, which would change the calculation of electric rates, the calculation or methodology of electric rates by eliminating the fuel surcharge and establishing rates to allow for power purchase, increased debt service, operations and maintenance on the powerhouse, and increased operation and maintenance on the out valley line. Additionally, the 2014-15 budget calls for a 4.6% rate increase in the variable portion of the electric rates effective November 1st. So what the effect of this ordinance would be that the usage rate of currently of 57 would increase to 68. However, the fuel adjustment charge would be eliminated from 8 cents, and these are averages for over the year, to 0, for a total change of from 64 to 68 cents in the variable portion. I think then the forecast, shows declining rates annually each year, with 65 in 2016, 63 in 17, 62 in 18, and 60 in 19. But please remember, these are all rates without the benefit of the depreciation. So our current budget does not anticipate that the depreciation drops from the current rate down to 3.5%. So that's where you see a disconnect between the two, is that depreciation. Staff still recommends that we increase our rates at this time because of the unknown factor of RES approval of this depreciation schedule, and of course how much kilowatt hours you're going to, how much it's going to snow. So at this point, we do recommend that we do increase the rates as per our budget study, adjusting them to the rates reflected.
I just want to add one other comment to that, is the RUS audit, which is in the process of being done, is for the calendar year. So they will look to say, were we in compliance during the 12 months of 2014? So their compliance period is not the same as our fiscal year. So without this, it's not clear to me that we would be in compliance with our loan for the full year
Of 14?
of 14.
For the tier ratio.
If you looked at it, if it were our fiscal year, you could sort of say, well, we have to be in compliance in the fiscal year, and we might have a little bit more flexibility, but we have to be in compliance for the calendar year 2014, and we've already fully allocated property tax. And that's kind of the question: is there other sources to bridge this period? And it isn't obvious to me with this. I don't
There's
know.
no source that complies with RUS.
That complies with RUS.
Because we actually do have a source, probably, if we wanted to.
We don't have one that complies
doesn't comply
with
with RUS.
Russ's definition of revenue to meet the tier ratio. And I think with $58 million loan with a lender, being in compliance with your loan,
Reasonably short.
Well, what source do
and
you see?
demonstrating our commitment to do that is extremely important.
If we fully utilize allocated property taxes, what other sources?
Well,
do you
no, I
see?
mean, we do have, the original thought, as I remember, of that $3.2 million, I think it was actually called a rate stabilization fund.
Yeah,
And that was for exactly this kind of a situation.
that's right.
But that's
But
cash,
use
not
of
revenue.
that, I
Yeah.
know, but
If
you
you
can't
don't
use
offer-
that and be compliant with RUS.
That's right. That's exactly the problem. Yeah, we
You
could.
can offer a rebate.
What?
You can offer a rebate out of $2.2 million. I'm not suggesting that we do that, but you're saying it's infeasible, and I'm questioning whether or not it is in fact infeasible.
The 3.2 million is a cash or balance sheet item. What Bob's talking about is income statement covenants. So the answer is no.
Let me just add on to that. I mean, Eric is correct. We could look at our reserve and say we're going to use some of our reserve to subsidize rates during a period. We could decide to do that, but Russ will still say, show me that you're in compliance with the 1.05 tier ratio. And that money from the reserve is not revenue for that calculation.
Correct, I understand.
Right, so the notion of a reserve fund to balance rates
Right.
adjustments doesn't comply. Effectively, we can't really rely on that for as long as we have a significant tier ratio to maintain the gross. In later years, that tier ratio is no longer a driver for the business. And then we could balance rate swings, but it's hard to imagine what the rate swings would be in the future because almost all of our costs are known, and you contract for power in 2 and 3 year increments. So it's unlikely we'd ever have to accommodate, a temporary blip.
So, Michael, is it fair for me or the audience to take away that the next time we have a public hearing on electric rates, we might be considering, it's more likely we'll be considering a reduction than anything else?
That would be a fair assumption.
And-
And it actually has to go through public hearing as well.
To reduce rates. And so if we were to have such a public hearing to reduce rates, from everything you know, what's the timing in your mind, maybe best and worst case? Not to put you on the spot.
No, I'm fiscally conservative. I wouldn't, I would wait until we got through the winter and see exactly where we stood with the the finalization of the Out Valley project, how we stood with the kilowatt sales, and then possibly predict something for the early summer. And if not then the end of the year.
Then when, I'm sorry?
If not then the end of the year as Howard has proposed.
Yeah. And I just guess for the board's benefit, for the record, my personal view, having heard this once before in the Finance Committee, is I would support a rate reduction if we get the 7 cents per kilowatt hour from reduced depreciation, but also leave in a buffer, a margin of error for assuming low snow years. And if we don't get a low snow year, then we get a good snow year, to have a year-end rebate. I just think that given the way the ski area operates, that might make a lot of sense. Any other questions or comments
Well,
from the
one
audience?
item
or
I did
board?
want to bring up so that it could be included into the public hearing, because I feel that it's the other ordinance before the board is 1405. This is a change in the net metering. The way that we calculate what we pay to solar energy net metering customers who generate more than they consume needs to be recalculated with the change in the Out Valley. Currently, they pay a voided cost, which is diesel, the same exact thing that we're having to change in our rates, plus some O&M at 33 kilowatts per hour will need to be changed to power purchase costs and O&M on the powerhouse, which is estimated at approximately 13 cents. So there will be a change to net metering customers with the change from an all diesel generation where their avoided cost is diesel over to a power purchase where their avoided cost is of course power purchase and the O&M on the powerhouse.
And that only applies to the surplus. In other words,
Yeah, they
the
get
excess
rack
that they'd be
rate
selling
during,
back at the end of the year.
yes, they get rack rate during the year. It's the surplus that we're talking about at the end of the year. Brandy, did I explain that? Yeah. So I wanted to make sure that was also addressed during our public hearing session. And with that,
As long as we're covering the net metering, there's another change that you're suggesting, which is the calculation would be done at the end of the year based on the actual costs, rather than the beginning of the year when the costs are unknown. And if that's the case, there's kind of a problem in displaying the monthly bill. So I would suggest that we would have the ability to include an estimate of the anticipated net meter excess rate, and then actually the actual one. Otherwise, I don't know how to generate the bills, the monthly statements. And just for the record, we have 3 net metering customers. 2 of them have systems that produce less than their total usage, so this rate wouldn't apply. And then there is a person who generates more, and so
This
that's
is all for one person.
well. There could be other people in the future, so it's a general purpose usage.
Okay.
But I would just recommend that be added in, that we do an estimate and then a true up of the excess rate.
Great. I think we can do that operationally without changing the ordinance.
Okay, all right.
Okay. And that concludes my presentation, and you could open the public hearing if you'd like.
There's a question you asked earlier, if you thought that delinquency rates or shut-offs would affect any of this materially or not.
I think that's a good question. Our, historically, the district's delinquency rate, our receivables have been extremely low, especially when we had a 60-day receivable. When the district went to a 30-day receivable, we saw that jump considerably for probably the first 6 months or so. But I think since that time, our receivables have come down considerably, and I don't think it's actually a factor. Jill, would you like to comment?
They're less than 1%.
Okay.
So less than 1% as a standard is extremely low.
Okay.
I've also looked at this issue, and we do seem to have one favorite customer that likes to be delinquent in large amounts, but all the rest tend to be quite small, as was mentioned, and also this is money that we ultimately collect by, foreclosure, by procedure on property if required. So there's a bit of a cash flow, but I couldn't see any influence that would. To influence rates a cent requires a $68,000 annual shortfall to influence by 1 cent. And so the total of this over the year is well less than that. So it's well under a penny.
So with that, we'll open up the public hearing. So I'd like to open up the public hearing to take public input and discuss the impact of the Out Valley project completion to the district's rates and the need for a change in the structure of the rates. We'd welcome all public input. I guess that's Nancy.
So I would just like to just make a few comments, and that is that I appreciate the district actually going ahead and purchasing those assets from Mountain Utilities, undertaking the Out Valley project. It appears that you've achieved your Out Valley project on time, on budget, that it looks like rates in the future are going to be reduced, and that there's potentially the possibility of a rate reduction acceleration. And fortunately, we're in a low rate environment. But I would encourage you to maybe not be conservative and reduce the rate sooner than later. From a way on the outside view, without a lot of knowledge, a lot of, being able to come to a public board meeting, it looks like, the district is doing okay. You're sitting on a lot of cash, and you have to ask a lot of questions to be able to figure out what's really happening. So, and I don't know how you otherwise communicate that to people out in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, input from the public? Yes, sir. Could you
Just a
please
question.
identify yourself?
My name is Mark Fraga, and if you'll let us sit back down, but just a question. If there's excess revenue from the utility rates, has a feasibility study been done, or just an analysis, if it would save us money in the long run to apply that to debt reduction?
It's appropriate to respond.
Sure.
Bob, would you mind taking that?
No, I'm happy to do that. What we've done is the only way to reduce debt without a penalty is to have debt expiring. So what we've done is we've anticipated kind of the best case cash scenario, and we have debt approximately lined up that will expire in 5 years, 6 years, 7, et cetera. And then as that does, then that lowers it down. We have to make the principal payment to retire the debt. So we've tried to do that in a way, and if we guess wrong, we can re-up the debt at the then current rate. So we have done exactly what you've said, but we have kind of a fallback plan, because the biggest variable, as you've seen from all of this, is our forecast on snow, which is no better than anybody else's. So that's ultimately the risk. But if we have good snow years, there's a limit on how much we can pay down debt, but we've sort of lined up debt that we could pay down. So that would start to affect rates in in 3 to 5 years. Before then, we have other costs. But your thought is exactly the right way to think about it.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments from the public? Hearing none, I guess we'll conclude the public hearing. So that's closed, and we move on to 8E, discussion and possible approval of ordinance 1406, adjusting district electric service charges and method of calculation. I think you've made your presentation. Bob, do you have a comment or two?
Well, I just want to sort of say that I think at 68 cents, we run the risk of people not showing up, and that it's going to actually reduce, it has the potential to reduce demand. So as opposed to thinking of 68 cents as the conservative thing to do until summer, I would argue that we want to basically look at it every month, and that we run the risk of keeping rates high. It's sending a message. That's not one that I want to send if we can avoid it. I know Michael's conservative. I think we all are, but I think sort of thus, as soon as we know definitively that there would be a depreciation reduction, we should sort of see where we are, do an analysis, and think about the timing as a way of not, it's just really expensive to be here in the winter. And I think we're adding to that, and if we can avoid it and still feel comfortable with our finances, we should look at that earlier.
Okay.
I don't like to disagree with Michael, but I'm on the side of earlier may have some benefits if it's not taking a risk that we don't want to take.
Do you have a recommendation, Michael, or anything else to say?
Yes, staff has done the presentation. We recommend that the board approve the ordinance 1406 and the ordinance for net metering at 1405 as presented.
Any further comments?
Yeah, so as I think I've mentioned a number of times, I mean, I felt like the commitment, well, the decisions we made in September of 2012, which was a well-attended public meeting, if you remember, where Howard presented, I guess that would have been the A8 analysis. It showed a lot of detail, as he's done this time. But at that time, I felt that people were saying, let's go do this. It was based on a maximum rate of around 65 or 66 cents or something like that. So I've always wanted to try to hit that target. The 68 cents, I mean, we just should note that that's not really what people are paying. People are really paying, depending on how much electricity they use, 70, 71, 72 cents when you include the other numbers. So what I wish is, and I guess the answer is there is no way, but for example, if we're setting this rate at 68 cents, the $21 a month meter charge, about $250 a year times 800 or so meters is about $200,000. My question is, are there $200,000 available to us to, in some manner, consistent with the Russ loan covenants, to use $200,000 to reduce the burden by at least that much? I guess that's the basic question that I have. And I absolutely agree that as soon as we get, assuming we do get a decrease in depreciation rate, and by that time we'll know whether there's some snow. I mean, the winter months are the expensive months, so it would be nice to get a great decrease sometime during the winter months. That may be too optimistic, but I agree with Bob Epstein's sentiment on that. So my question, though, is, are there $200,000 available from the $3.2 million in some way consistent with Russ covenants?
Well, the $200,000 is already in the Russ revenue. Right, so that doesn't change anything. I mean, I guess we should defer to Howard, but the only other source would be using more property tax, but I don't think there is any more.
So the answer is no. The to get to a 1.05 ratio, our plan calls for 68 cents rate now, November, December, and January, to meet our 1.05 ratio using all of our property tax and all of our electric revenues. So absolutely not. In January, February, March, if we get the depreciation, possibly we could reduce rates at that time if we get depreciation. But that's based on winter, having winter kilowatt hours. As we've noticed in the Howard's presentation, if we don't get kilowatt hours, if we don't get skier counts, then once again, we're stuck with the higher rates on lower kilowatt hours.
No, I understand that.
But those rates, I mean, this coming winter's rates assume the kilowatt hours are kind of the average between our last two, unfortunately, weak winters.
No, you're right.
So it's to cover that. So yeah, better snow and lower depreciation.
Well, I certainly
Yeah.
agree with Bob, though, that we should tackle the rate reduction whenever we can and not be quite so conservative.
Nancy?
So this presentation now has just kind of confused me, because when can you use cash? I mean, it's based upon what you've already got. It's sitting on your balance sheet. When can you use it?
We can use cash to pay down debt and other capital items, but we can't use cash to lower rates.
And that's all mandated by Russ.
It's all mandated by the covenants of our loan provisions. That's right. They're looking to say, are you willing to run a business such that your revenues cover your expenses?
Right.
And if you go in to borrow a rainy day fund, then that's saying you're not willing to do that. And the agreement from which we borrowed $58 million from the federal government was we would agree to maintain rates at a rate that covers our total costs, our total current costs.
Okay, thank you.
And of course,
So
the
yes,
benefit-
our strong cash position covers us in the event of capital, problems where we have to purchase things or that sort, but it doesn't cover P&L.
Of course, the benefit of having done that, Nancy, was 3% interest rate, rather than 5 or 7 or 7.5 or 8%, which was originally
Which would-
contemplated.
Feasible numbers.
And the remaining borrowing that we have of almost $3 million is all going to be, we anticipate that being short term. And so the Finance Committee has a goal of getting rid of that .006 by
Yeah,
at
we
least
start with a
0.007. So our final interest rate would start with a 2. And I think that's achievable. Not that that would make
Knock
a
on
difference
wood.
in rates, but it would make us feel happy. Sure.
So with that, I entertain a motion for approval of ordinance 1406, adjustment of district electric service charges and method of calculation.
I'd like to move that we approve, are we doing the resolution separately or together?
The ordinance is separate.
Yeah, that we approve resolution 1406.
Second.
I'll second that motion.
All reluctantly,
Yeah, we were very reluctant.
but thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Since I'm the one who signed that lousy IA,
I'm
I might as well second this motion, too.
Yeah, I'm fixing it. I'm waiting to fix it.
Just a minor
It's like
point.
waiting for Godot.
So Howard's presentation was in March of 2012, is when we did that.
But it was in September of 2012 that we had that big meeting.
Oh, okay.
9/29/12 is the.
Was the big meeting?
slide.
Okay. I have the March 31. Okay. All right. Got it.
That's when we applied for the loan,
Right.
because Bob and I had just been elected, and then we got the loan in September, and the question is whether not to use it.
Right. Right.
So
Got
that
it.
passes unanimously.Moving to 8F, discussion and possible approval of ordinance 1405, amending rules concerning interconnection of distributed electric sources and net metering. Can I just hang up? Would somebody like to make a motion to approve that?
First, I'd just like to make one quick comment, is just that, I know, but I'll just reiterate it for public consumption. This just follows the state law, the state rules for doing this, right? So we're just following along with the state law. I'd like to move that we
All of state law.
approve, it follows state law, approve resolution number, what is it?
1405.
1405.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
So we'll go back to the beginning, 8A, which is new and unfinished business discussion and possible action regarding the timeline, costs, and construction activities associated with the Out Valley Power Line project. And there are 5 sub-bullets. I think Michael's going to take all of these together, which are overall construction update and risks, Out Valley operations and maintenance and transportation investigation, project closeout, celebration plans, and potential press release.
As Standish noted, the Out Valley Project report will come into 3 agenda titles today. Actually, 10 topics will be discussed. The Out Valley construction update and the remaining risks that we face. Operations and maintenance, which is taking a lot more of our time lately. Our project closeout, celebration plans, potential press release, the revision of the IA agreement, the overall project costs and the remaining financial risks, our VA loan drawdown, our powerhouse depreciation study, and luckily we have Dave Brightly here, and the U.S. Forest Service special use permit. The underground construction timeline, starting with the underground, it's hard to find areas that are actually not complete now. The paving and striping was done. I think if you drove up on from Silver Lake side, I think it looks really good. The striping's all done. The dry grindings have been taken from that area and brought to Kirkwood and laid out on areas of Vale's parking lots. This one right out here was done, the one over at VIP parking was done, and the cross-country center. And they were all done what I would call professionally, where it's laid, it's graded, and then a large roller is rolled on top of them. And that's kind of a way that the district and Q&D said thank you to Vale for the use of their staging area in the middle Red Cliff parking area for 2 years without any cost, without any charge at all. So Amador County sign-off. Q&D completed paving on the Bear River Road area. They completed 1,400 feet of additional paving. And I'm pleased to say that the Amador County has signed off, and our 3-year maintenance period now begins, or our warranty period. So if there's areas that are workmanship deficiencies in that, our time clock has started. Warning identification stickers are being installed on all the sectionalizing cabinets and vaults. The staging area has been released back to the resort. Snowpole parkers on the sectionalizing cabinets are being installed, and the district staff will complete our final inspections of it. Also, we'll be installing a snow stake along the snowmobile route. So certain parts of the Out Valley underground portion actually go along a snowmobile route that's maintained by the Forest Service. We're putting in snow stakes, sectionalizing cabinets to better mark where those are so they're not treated as ramps or jumps. Jumps. This is a picture of the ID. You'll see them every 500 feet along the way. You'll see them along the road. They're actually facing the road. They're not facing this way. They're facing that way. So you'll see them. They're very attractive. This is where we get really excited. Exciting. We're starting the completion of the final inspection of the overhead line. And we actually, RCI and Dave Wrightley and I went out and did the 34K section this last week. The CT that was on a breaker was replaced on 10/8, and PG&E has confirmed the test results. PG&E will re-energize that breaker at Cam Green on 10/13. On 10/14 and 15, which is Tuesday or Wednesday of next week, Trimark and CalISO will be testing, certifying our meter, and verifying the communications to CalISO.
Can you remind me what Trimark is?
Trimark is a calibration.
Oh, okay.
They're just all about certifying that meter.
Okay, thank you.
They're not a big player.
Okay.
Emerson, who is our electrical testing company. They've tested everything from the out valley, underground, and the overhead. Emerson and EEC will be doing the functional test on KM Green to KM Blue, doing their end-to-end testing for relays on the 15th and 16th. And then on 10/17, a week from yesterday, we will do a test energization of the 34.5 line, which will mean that power will be all the way turned on from Salt Springs to Kirkwood next Friday. 10/13 through 10/21, PG&E will do their end-to-end testing. That has actually been moved to 10/14, well within that time frame, but we have got confirmation of that. Final testing of the substation, or final inspection of the substations is scheduled for 10/22, and then between 10/21 and 10/31 is set aside for testing and commissioning. So with that, I was wondering, maybe Dave Rightly could give us a little bit more details on this very aggressive schedule.
Thanks, Michael. We've got another engineer coming out tomorrow, so for this coming week, Sean Clifton and I will be working with Emerson, district staff, PG&E, we'll be both at Green and Blue. As we're going through all this work this week and what we've been doing the last couple of weeks, we're actively engaged with the district staff in all phases. When this re-energization of the breaker occurs Monday morning, we'll have a district operator is going to be the one that closes the breaker. So we're providing training as we go along. There's going to be more formal training. I'll be talking about that. A little bit about the Trimark Cal ISO information is, you had mentioned a VPN. We successfully provisioned a new VPN, which Cal ISO needs. It's now sitting at the powerhouse. As you can kind of tell, the fiber optic is working. We're already communicating between Green and Blue. And what's going to happen by Wednesday morning is somebody at Cal ISO in Stockton, is it Stockton or Folsom, I think, somewhere, they'll actually on their computer be reading the meter. And from that point on, they'll read it whenever they want. And I believe Cal ISO will typically read it daily.
Is there any load, so there's something to read?
There's a little bit of load. When we turn the transformer on at Green, it's 7.5 kilowatts, so every hour it uses 7.5 kilowatt hours. And they need some of that because it's a way to confirm that the meter's reading accurately. As Michael said, we'll be doing a bunch of functional testing here. One interesting part about our functional testing that will probably be happening Thursday, there's protection communications between Green and Blue. If something happens at Blue, certain conditions will tell us that we want to open the breaker at Green. That other things can happen at Green, which we say we need to open the breaker at Blue. We've already done some testing on that, it works, but we're going to do the functional testing where we actually tell the relay there's a fault and see that we tripped on the other side. We'll be doing that bidirectionally Thursday. This event next Friday, which we're all anxiously looking forward to, when we test energize, we'll be able to confirm that we've controlled the reactive power well enough. We've modeled it. We believe we're in really good shape, that we'll know the answer when we energize. Another important part of putting that on is in discussions with PG&E. PG&E needs load from us to finish their final end-to-end testing. They now have determined that pretty much our reactive power is enough of a load for them to test their relays. So this end-to-end testing that Michael's describing, we intend to, when we energize the 35 kV, have PG&E at Green, and they will then do their that should be enough for them to finish their end-to-end testing. Would be, and that by test energizing the 35 kV, we give them what they need. After we test energize, we're starting with conservative low voltages. This has to do with reactive power. We expect then to adjust our voltages on the system to what we think would be the nominal, and we would basically will be ready to go, ready to operate. With one last thing needs to be done, which is to confirm the synchronization or the rotation of the power between out valley and the generators. As you know, in the future, the capability will be there to seamlessly switch between one and the other, and the only way to make that happen is to make sure they're all synchronized. So we've talked to district staff. Randy is going to be scheduling an outage for Friday afternoon the 17th, because we will need to actually have out valley on, have the generators running, and then check synchronization with equipment to make sure, if it's not synchronized, it's a simple act of swapping some cables around, basically.
So
This is
will
the way to
make
prove.
the lift chairs go the right way.
We want the lifts to go uphill, yeah. But this is, with 24.8 miles of cable, and even though all the cables are labeled, we know we think A phase, B phase, and C phase is, this is the way to prove that there hasn't been a mistake anywhere in there. By the end of the day Friday, if everything goes well, we will de-energize the 35 kV. We don't need to be just using all that, that load that I'm talking about. It's a small amount of losses on your system, so we expect to de-energize it. PG&E should be done with their end-to-end testing. Looking ahead towards this November 1st go-live date that Cal ISO recognizes, Exponential expects to come back in late October, provide some more formal training for district staff prior to that, and then be ready to energize. The system will be in a configuration that we could actually, from the powerhouse, if we wanted to turn the power on, we would be remotely operating equipment at green. Depending on access, or we may go down to green anyway, but I would expect when it actually happens, it'll be a pretty quiet event. And that's, start November 1, you've got some ongoing maintenance activities.
We look forward to it.
So Dave, you don't actually feel there's a need to bring up a load bank and test
No.
it under a higher load?
No, our models show, the transformer at green has a little bit of load.
Yeah.
The reactive power of the cable substantially has some load, and even we can energize the transformer at blue here, and that adds some additional load.
Uh-huh.
But based on our models, the numbers I've given to PG&E, they feel it'll be adequate.
Well, I understand it's adequate for PG&E's purposes. Is it adequate for ours to
Oh, yes,
do
yes.
no load testing? And no
It-
significant load testing till we use our own load?
Now, with this system, the one thing we know for sure is that the voltage drop, which is what I would worry about with load, is voltage drop.
Uh-huh,
Is that
right.
we've had to use a size cable to be able to minimize voltage drop. We have a system that really is greater than 10 megawatt capacity, at least in the cable.
Right.
The transformers are limited to 10, and as you know, your IA is limited to 10. But we will see very little voltage drop with the initial load we put on November 1st. So we have no concerns at all about load, carrying load.
Okay. And when you talk about synchronizing the powerhouse with the grid, is that the 60 hertz signal or is that the three-phase being synchronized?
It's all 60 hertz, but you have three phases. And imagine that, one follows another one.
Uh-huh.
And you need to make sure that the rotation of the three phases, as it applies to any motor you have on your customer's system,
Uh-huh.
is in the positive direction. And then one other thing is just basically making sure that we basically get all three of them to match. If we think this is A phase here, we know where A phase is on the generator, we want to make sure we're on A phase on the system.
Uh-huh. Okay, and I know a couple of residential customers that were expecting three-phase in the past and it wasn't right, and so they had to replace their equipment. Would this now be corrected, or is that a surprise to you?
That's a surprise. I hadn't heard
Oh.
that one. But
Okay.
no, the rotation and synchronization that Out Valley will have will be identical to what the generators have.
Okay.
And this is
Well,
important.
this was prior to the current generators, these are the old ones. So maybe, okay.
But it won't
And
have
then-
an impact on the distribution system.
No, we have to check the synchronization to make sure it doesn't have an impact.
Okay. So can you help me with the visualization? I imagine turning a switch on and off as being, a big lever. What is it in fact?
If everything goes well next Friday, we intend to actually leave the switches open or closed all the
Uh-huh.
way to here,
Uh-huh.
and have a safety visual open here. We'll have a breaker open at the powerhouse that'll be racked out. It'll make sure that the Out Valley power can't flow into the power. It'll basically stop in the dirt room.
Uh-huh, right.
What's going to happen would be someone would be racking that breaker in, cranking the breaker in, and from the computer, most likely, sitting in the control house or in the dirt room, someone's going to click a button and it's going to close the breaker at green.
Uh-huh.
From that same computer, then they're going to talk to the breaker at blue and they're going to close it.
So the breakers have a motor on them to cause them to be remotely operated? Or you can do it manually?
You can't operate.
You can't operate them manually?
No. These are big, very, very large breakers. You have to charge them pretty good. You can trip the breaker, it's got a charged spring in it.
Uh-huh.
But to close it again, it takes a motor. charge that spring.
Okay.
Dave, I have a question or two on communications, which is, I understand there's a fiber line from KM Green to Blue, and that there's a working VPN to CalISO right now, and that we are obligated to provide a dedicated T1 to PG&E, and I understand that's for automated shut-off between the three substations in the event of a fault, and I understand there's some issues there. But my question is really with respect to voice. So it came up when Michael and I were meeting yesterday on the PG&E end-to-end testing, where we have a solution, I think, where there's a satellite phone with an antenna that goes through the roof. And Michael was saying that the backup plan is to get a new phone, this Grandstream GXP 1400, where it's a speakerphone coming out of our voice over IP system between KM Green and KM Blue. By the way, if I've got any of the facts wrong, correct me. But then we take that speakerphone, and then in the powerhouse we have a regular phone system, copper or POTS or PSTDN, and we kind of put one speakerphone on top of the other, and we hope that PG&E and Stockton hears PG&E and KM Green. And that struck me as just kind of not the right thing to do. So I was wondering, I mean, is there something like an analog gateway or a FXO gateway or an FXS gateway that would enable our dedicated voice over IP phone system terminating in KM Green to actually make outgoing calls through our copper system that goes into the powerhouse? And specifically, rather than speakerphones going like this, I looked on your vendor's website, and there's something here called a Grandstream Analog IP Gateway GXW410F, which says it would convert SIP and RTPIP calls traditional PSTN.
He asks this question every meeting. We're used to it.
My big picture question is, I think it's kind of brain dead of us not to be able to make phone calls out of KM Green, and wouldn't something like this enable that to happen for under, say, $200, which is what it costs? Have you looked into that, or would it make sense to look at that?
We have not looked into trying to connect the Out Valley telecommunications system specifically to the outside. There was a lot that you said there. The Out Valley relaying and communications is a separate local area network. Basically, it's a LAN. Now, because the relays are on that LAN, it's critical for security that we keep that away from the district's local area network.
Okay.
By keeping these phones separate, then a hacker couldn't possibly get in and talk to the relay. The analog option is one. That is where we drop this VoIP line at the powerhouse and then cross-connect it to an analog phone. That would be a safe thing, because there's no way, you can't get through the internet across that thing. But we certainly felt, working with District Tech, it was functional, that if you were able to call from Green and talk to people at Blue, and there would be a way to actually add a phone here at this building if you wanted to, or have a couple phones at Blue, one in the control house, one in the dirt room. That was how we envisioned this, the need for the phone there. It's certainly not going to need to call from Green to order a pizza, but there is a consideration of an emergency at Green, and you've got to make sure that you talk to people. One option for the district staff would be to say, if we have somebody at Green, we make sure somebody's monitoring the phone over here so they can answer him, if it's not connected to the public network. But if it gets to the point where the district staff is not going to be monitoring that, I think an analog gateway could work. That would be a secure way to do it without connecting the internet.
Okay. Go ahead.
It does seem like, I'm sorry if the board is helping you with your design, but
I'm not.
just in case we are. The other option is a fiber optic line. We could put a second LAN on it. Right?
There are spare fibers right now. I mean,
Yeah, so
spend
we
some
could
money and
do
actually
that,
go.
and then so there's one LAN that just makes it our phone system, and then a totally separate wire
Right.
that does the switching. I agree with you to make sure there's no tunneling possible to get to have a hacker from somewhere.
A little bit
Visit our
about the
switch table.
T1 circuit in when you started out. This T1 circuit is needed, you're right, for PG&E to monitor and control Green. And it's because Green and Salt Springs and Tiger are one system. They've got to be able to see that. So the district has gotten this T1 line. That T1 line, it was agreed with PG&E previously, was not a requirement for us to energize the system. In their T1 design, they had, on their end in green, they had SCADA equipment that's monitoring the relays. They also had a telephone that's part of this T1. As of last week, only about 10 days ago, PG&E suddenly informed us that this T1 line is now a critical part of the end-to-end testing because they are not comfortable with their communication from green to what they need to do is they need to talk to Salt and Tiger. And the need for this phone is not for the protection signals, it's only so that they can coordinate with each other as they're testing.
Understood.
The power line carrier between the 3 stations right now is what they're going to be testing. They're going to say that green talks to Salt, Salt talks to Tiger, and so on and so forth. So this idea of speakerphones and phones held like this was a quick way to try to get, using the equipment that we already had, try to get PG&E to communications. I can report that I had a good, we're working with them daily, but I had a good conversation with their testing supervisor yesterday afternoon. This new satellite antenna that the district staff installed is working just superbly, and he and I had a long conversation with me standing on the platform in front of the PG&E door at the building. So I think he's satisfied with how that communication is going. He is scheduling the end-to-end test. I have full confidence it's going to happen. Another thing about the T1 is it's been frustrating to deal with AT&T, but we have I believe we have a firm date now of October 17th. So we now know that by next Friday they're going to correct the problem and PG&E's phone will work.
Okay.
And then their need for us to back them up will go away.
Well, what I'm sort of driving at is I know there are 3 separate communication issues: KM Green to Cal ISO, KM Green to PG&E, and then voice of some kind. And if we had voice of some kind right now between KM Green and the outside world, they could do their end-to-end testing. And I'm kind of thinking just down the road, we need voice from KM Green to the outside world, I think, just in case, just so we don't, if there's somebody down there at KM Green, just so we don't have to have Brandy's workers staffing, KM Blue and with 2 phones relaying. And whether it's a separate LAN or an analog gateway, I think you should look into that, Michael. And I don't think it costs a lot of money, under $200, if we can program it right. Thank you. That's my tirade for today.
Any other questions?
So I guess one more. So knowing whether the transformer up here works or not, where the schedule assumes that transformer will work fine.
I'm very confident in the transformer. The transformer was fully tested in the factory. And then, after being installed here, it was retested. You make sure that there was no damage on shipment.
How do you test it without a power source?
By using a small test set which can create high voltage. So
I see.
We do what we call, our term is high pot.
Right.
But you basically actually put 35 kV. In fact, you can put higher than that on it.
Okay, but low amp.
Low amperage, and what you're looking for is leakage. You put that voltage on there, and if you see leakage, it means you may see a ground fault inside the equipment. And we've done other things. Megger testing confirms that there's not a ground inside the tank. Now I'm very, very confident in the transformer.
Okay, great.
Where's the transformer?
It's right outside the powerhouse on the north side.
It's
Campus.
outdoors, so it's you
It's
can see
outdoors,
it.
it's right.
By the way, Dave, thank you very much for all your hard work on our behalf over the last 2 years. We appreciate it very much.
It's a pleasure working with the district.
Thank you.
Michael, we'll turn it back over to you. Unless there are any questions from the audience or the board?
I guess I'm reacting to hearing one thing in there. I want to say, if we're going to remotely activate the breakers at Green the very first time from up here without anybody at Green.
We will have already activated those breakers multiple times. We've already operated the breaker over there a number of times already. And we've done it with the handle. There's actually a handle at Green where you can open and close it. So we've tested that. In fact, that's the method we're going to use Monday morning.
My gut reaction is the first time you do this live, not having somebody standing down there at Green just seems like, a little investment in just in case.
Oh, I think there's going to be a person at both ends, probably.
Good. No further questions.
Please proceed.
So to reiterate, within a week, the 34K line will be energized, hot from Salt Springs to Kirkwood. PG&E will be done. CalISO meter certification communication will be done, and we'll have 10 days to go to button up and go live.
Congratulations.
Can we applaud?
So, as mentioned, staff has begun the final inspections on the overhead lines, tough terrains as shown, and I wanted to show the condition of the Bear River staging area that's now been released back to the Forest Service. So I think they left it in real nice shape. If you haven't been down there, that's KM Green. And if you take a look, that's a person there on a ladder. That's a 14-foot ladder, 14-foot fence with 3 barbed wire on the top of it. So it's a massive structure. And those are actual people working on it, so it gives you some sort of sense of scale. Here's another shot of green. So construction and administration risks at this point. The T1 communication lines, to put this into simple terms, the KM Green and Stock, the T1 line is a communication line that's from KM Green to Stockton required by PG&E. Since this line has nothing to do with the district, we requested that PG&E place the order for this line and pay for it, but were refused. This line is needed for PG&E to complete end-to-end testing on the 3-way protection scheme. The line is actually in. It's already installed, but due to an error, it was placed in the wrong channel down in Stockton. We are now waiting for it to be moved to the correct channel down in Stockton, hopefully on 10/17. The order was originally placed in April. PG&E has threatened to de-energize the 115 kV if this issue is not resolved by next Tuesday. EEC, Dave Brightley and staff are working on various communication options to get around this roadblock, as has been discussed. We have looked at cell phones with walkie-talkies, back-to-back speaker phones, as we just talked about, and then finally our best item is that we found an exterior antenna that we could actually place on the roof with a hard line to a cell phone, which has been actually our best reception to date. This has been an extremely serious issue, and I appreciate Dave Brightley, Brandy, and the rest of the staff. People have gone out of their way to make sure that this happens. It should be noted that the need for this line goes away with the installation of the Salt Springs switch station. Another risk is the end-to-end testing for PG&E. That's scheduled for Tuesday. Hopefully the communication, that's only one of the issues. We hope that the test actually works and goes well. Another is the energization of the 34K, that everything holds once we turn that on 10/17. An additional risk, we're still waiting on the IA revision to get that signed. We just got the bill of sale back from PG&E, so we're seeing movement. I think with PG&E, it's not a matter of issues, it's a matter of resources, that they just have not had the resources to put forward to this, but there seems to be no issues from what we have talked about, and which we'll talk a little bit more about today. CalISO metering certification is scheduled for Tuesday and Wednesday of next week. We got the AT&T line in, so we do have a communications. We just need to certify that line. I think it's important to note that I'm talking about all of these risks, but last month I talked about these risks, and these were a little bit more substantial risks than we had this time. So we seem to continuously have risk. Every month, every week we have risk, but we resolve those risks and move on. So I think that the list isn't getting any smaller, but at least it's changing. With that, I'll take any questions before I get into operations and maintenance.
Any questions from the board? Comments? Questions or comments from the audience? Please proceed, Michael. This is supposed to be a short meeting.
Suddenly I feel like I should rush. So operations and maintenance on the underground. We have got great news. Alpine County has come through for the district again. They have an excess piece of equipment. It's an expedition that is being surplused over to the district. We're going to turn that expedition into our Out Valley vehicle. We've talked about this to the Operations and Capital Committee. This is a great because it already has a light bar, already has a radio in it. We're going to change the light bars from red lights to yellow lights, more of a utility vehicle. But we talked about the safety, our Brandy's people out on the highway. This is going to enhance that safety, and we're working on putting cones up and being able to make sure that we have the correct way to work on our equipment. We're going to be visiting all of our sectionalizing cabinets and putting in omni balls, putting in the locks that are needed on the sectionalizing cabinets. We have gotten a GPS and have gotten that programmed by RCI, and they actually did a training session so we can now target different locations using GPS for snow time locating. Takes pictures. It's a nice unit. We will have a satellite phone that has been. We have purchased a satellite phone. We're using it in communication. We also went out and actually tested this phone at each of the sectionalizing cabinets. It has bars at each location, so we will have communications out there in the field. We'll be doing locates. Locates is where you actually power up the wires that go around the sectionalizing cabinets, so that if we do that, we'll be able to put in the snow poles that are needed for the snowmobile area. We don't want to be the ones that drive a snow pole through our brand new system. We actually are inheriting 2 roads. The maintenance of 2 roads will go along with this because we have access roads out there. These are Forest Service roads. The only intent of those is to access our equipment. There's 2 gates that will be up. We have the keys to those gates, so these will be accessible by only district staff and by Forest Service personnel. And we, of course, need to put in bollards around the equipment. As you remember, we'll have protection bollards all around our vulnerable equipment, district to install, and this will be a reduction change order in the amount of $48,000. We're also going through and putting in warning stickers inside the sectionalizing cabinets. This is done prior to energization. We just don't want to be taking unnecessary risks. So Brandy's crew is out there now putting on the stickers on the sectionalizing cabinets. This year will be done prior to 10/17. So for the substations, there's signs that need to be done on the fences that need to be installed. We're looking at putting in a snow blower at KM Green to move the snow around because we need to do, we have spare parts that we've gotten from Wilson, so we're storing those spare parts, things like the green insulators, additional ladders to go up the poles. We need to do data recording down at KM Green, so there's 3 points that we need to get to do that, at the transformer and the 2 breakers. We'll have inspection forms so that not only will we be inspecting them, but we'll actually transfer that information on a master sheet, which Brandy will be keeping. Transportation is still an issue, whether we rent a snowmobile this time to get out to KM Green. I walked it the other day. It's too far to walk in the snow. We'll need some sort of a transportation vehicle to get there. Fence maintenance, one of the items that Dave will be putting on our maintenance sheet is a perimeter check of the fence to make sure there is no intrusions. We did put in, as the board remembers, we put in a bottom collar on the fence, and we actually filled it up past that, so it looks very secure at this point. So I think we did a good job with that. Maintenance of the KM Green, there's actually a road in between KM Green and the line shack up on top. So if you walked out of the KM Green and looked up the hill, that's where the line shack is. We assume maintenance of that road as well. Now, maintenance of a road is typically in this environment is making sure that the water bars stay in place, so that if you have a deluge, that you replace the water bars as you need. Maybe a little bit of vegetation management, but mostly it's the water bars that we're talking about. And once again, we'll have bollards. Here's a quick shot of the control building. It has stairs going to it now. As far as the overhead, We'll have the inspections that we need. We've started those inspections. The biggest item on the inspections is making sure that we don't have any theft of the copper ground wires. Making sure that the insulators have not become targets. And the biggest hazard out there are the trees, hazardous trees falling down on the, that's going to be our biggest maintenance issue is vegetation. If it's trees now are within striking distance per se of the overhead line, but they're healthy trees. And you can't take out every tree that might be 100 and some odd feet. We have a 60-foot corridor on the 34K and an 80-foot corridor on the 115. We'll have inspection forms on the overhead. We'll have to deal with transportation once again. The overhead, like I mentioned, has a road maintenance factor. We'll be taking pictures of everything. Actually, I think we already have those. We have the satellite phone, as mentioned before. We have the GPS unit. It's tough terrain. So,
Michael, quick question on the trees. So, in the next year or two, if something were to happen, that a tree toppled and took out a line, is it Wilson who would go out on our behalf?
yeah, so Wilson, we have a letter of intent that I believe I put into the packet where we're going to be using Wilson to do any lineman activities. Of course, Brandy's people will be there to assist with transportation, shutting things down. But Wilson will be our contractor for the overhead and the substations, and Titan will be our contractor for the underground. And that's who you're going to call.
Can I ask you just to follow up on what you just said, Eric? So, let's say worst case scenario, it happened in the middle of winter. They're very capable of getting out, and let's just say we had a wonderful, wonderful snow year. There would be no or limited impacts from that. If a line came down and somebody had to go out there to tend to it, the Wilson.
Well, the nice thing about the district is that we have the powerhouse.
Right.
So we go immediately on powerhouse. We wouldn't be like a lot of where it's working around the clock. We could do this safely. We could do it during the day and use the powerhouse, utilize the powerhouse to But I would assume that the board would want to get those repairs done as quickly as possible. And PG&E would require us to do it if it affected the 12 kV, because they have customers on that as well.
So just one other question. If we wanted to do a planned transition to the powerhouse, is that going to cause a power outage of any form, or is it transparent?
Right now, it has not been tested. I owe Michael a
Right.
proposal to do some tweaking on that to make sure that it can work. All the parts we believe are there to allow it. So in the event of a tree coming down, obviously you have to have an outage.
Right.
But but I am confident that in the future you'll be able to seamlessly go from one to the other. So that would be typically for scheduled maintenance.
Right.
You need to do some work on the line, you get your generators on, you switch them over, you de-energize the line, do your work, and come back.
And during the short period when they're both operating, we're not sending power?
It's got, according to the PG&E handbook, and in multiple discussions with PG&E, you are allowed to have very short-term paralleling, and that's the tweaking that I'm talking about.
Okay.
What's going to happen is the generators will actually track the out valley and then match out valley in frequency and voltage. And when they match, there's another sync check that's a safety device in there, that when that thing is happy, it allows it to close, and automatically, not manually, it then will very quickly open the other breakers. So the paralleling will last for literally less than a second.
It should be noted that if a tree did fall on it, and we did have a power outage, the first thing that would happen is our system, a load-dependent start-stop, which we actually turned off. That would be turned back on, and the whole powerhouse would turn on at once. But it takes time for them, these generators to warm up. So yeah, you're going to have a power outage, but as soon as those generators warm up, all 8 generators will be running, and then they'll start to drop off as it syncs with the amount of demand there is.
Okay, and that transition time is on the order of how much? 5 minutes.
What was the answer, Brandy?
5 minutes or so.
relatively short by our standards.
Historical standards, not
Historical
current
standards.
Historical standards, that's not.
So we'll have time before the ski resort opens to test this, but we do anticipate gremlins in the system. It's, we're turning on a new system, and we had really good luck with the powerhouse, turning on that system, but we did have our gremlins and our issues, so just a warning. So during these inspections, it is tough terrain. You can see the type of terrain. When we do inspections, we actually even have to look at the bolts, which I was somewhat surprised at.
They can loosen, with wind and vibration, bolts can loosen, the nuts can loosen.
We'll be looking at that. I was talking about the ground wires on the poles and the possible theft of those. This is a picture of that ground wire. Of course, this is filled in now, but this is the wire that we're talking about, and a portion of that, maybe even a foot, is above the grade level.
Dave, a question came up in our committee meetings. Are those solid copper or is it?
Stranded copper.
It is all copper though.
Yes. If you stole one of those grounds, you wouldn't get a lot.
So for the project closeout, placed the information in the board packet again, pages 12 through 13, regarding the steps needed to close out a public works project. We are in the punch list phase, so we still have a ways to go, including as-built, punch list, final acceptance, monitoring for stop notices, board acceptance, final payment. On the permanent side, we'll need to work on the completion of these items. Final acceptance documents will be prepared for the December 12th meeting. So at that time, we'll have all of our consultants here, and we'll have the final acceptance of the project by the board, if you so chooses. So, any questions on operations and maintenance and project closeout? Moving on, it would be great to actually have the need for a celebration party. The date is December 12th, and hopefully we'll be hosting it. The details are in your packet. The event will be at the Wall Bar from 6 to 9. Appetizers will be served. After a social period, presentations by Standish, Michelle Gamble, and the general manager. We're looking for awards to be given to our partners and general contractors. David, please look away. This is a rough idea of what we're looking at. We have had input from the barbecue committee, actually, as far as our layout, and this is kind of what we've been looking at as far as a different plaque for each of the different members. So with that, is there any questions on our celebration party?
So after that celebration party, it's like after you win the Super Bowl, the people walk up and go, what's happening next? And I would think that you'd be able to say, I'm going to Disneyland, or I'm taking a vacation. I mean.
I like the Disneyland party. That's great.
We're hoping to go skiing.
Yeah.
And build a switching station.
Remind me what time's the board meeting on that day?
1 o'clock.
So the only other item on this first 8A is a potential press release. At this point, we've been receiving some requests to put out a potential press release, and the staff would look forward to working with board members on doing that probably within a couple of weeks of completion.
Any questions or comments? Additional questions or comments on 8A? 8B.
The ad hoc committee and district staff have been working with PG&E to revise the interconnection agreement to provide for the 115 ownership change to the district, PG&E continuing to own and operating the 12 kV, district complying with the TIH. Time frame is a 4-year period for compliance, district assumes liability of operation of the 115 during this period. The new point of demarcation is shown, is depicted in this picture. Of course, once again, PG&E has required that we have a form of our own fault protection at this location, which will entail the installation of a potential switching station. We're researching several options at this time, but we have agreed to get this completed within 2 to 4 years. This would be the location. We're going to be going down there within the next couple of weeks, actually try to firm up the location. We're hoping that it'd be between poles 1 and 2. There's a big wide area here. We're actually looking to kind of put it up against the slope, trying to get them they don't want to use up their big wide area. So if we can hide this up against the slope a little bit, which would be over towards the right.
And this is PG&E private land that we're talking about, or is it Forest Service land?
I think it's PG&E land.
And do they deed that to us, or do they rent it? Do they? What's the legal ownership of the land after we do this? Our rights to it.
Yeah, I think that these things need to be explored. PG&E is willing to provide us the land,
okay.
whether it's a lease, a purchase, or I would assume that it would be a lease.
Okay.
And if something ever happened, we'd have to do something. I don't know exactly.
So do we know for sure that whatever we do, it's going to be on land and not up in a pole?
Yes.
Okay.
That is going to be where?
On land. It can't be
It can't be
a switch.
equipment that's...
Michael asked me that question 15 times. I said no every time. Can't be on a pole.
It can't be on a pole. Okay. You haven't said no to me, so I wanted to give you that
It
opportunity.
has to be on the ground.
Okay.
So we'll be, RCI staff and EEC will be visiting the site for a suitable location. And then we'll actually begin team meetings on this project starting on October 21st. So when you asked if we're going to Disneyland, not quite. We'll be starting
Feels
on
like Disneyland sometimes.
this project. Our meetings will focus on the RCI EEC proposals. We'll need proposals for them to, design and implement a specified project. I've outlined what that project will be. If it's a bigger project than that, of course, that'll be a larger cost. If it's less than that, but I've outlined what I think is a good mid-range project today. The site location, we have to do an actual request letter to PG&E requesting a change in the IA. That's kind of the first step. Environmental and identifying who our major partners on this project will be. This time it won't be Caltrans. It'll be the Forest Service again. It'll be PG&E, Hydro Division down there. There'll be different players for us. We've talked about the potential costs, as Peter mentioned. Construction costs of $2 million, but it could go with all the different aspects. 2.6, we just don't know at this point. So we know the consequences of default. The ownership goes to PG&E, the payment on the ITCC tax. We know that the cost of ownership charges would go up substantially, and those are depicted on this that you've seen in the past.
Could you go back one slide?
Please.
So that would be an increase of $322,000 annually? Or
That would be a total.
Total.
So I went through that fairly quickly because we've seen those before, but I did want to discuss them once again.
Michael, there's a letter in our packet regarding whether we need to do an EIR or not. Can you comment on that for this project? What we know? What do we have to do in the analysis?
Joe and Michael has looked at it, and we're hoping that we don't have to do any sorting, that we can do just a supplemental onto our existing EIS. It's in the same footprint. The vegetation has been looked at, the natural habitat's been looked at, the geology's actually been looked at. So we're in a really good shape with dovetailing onto existing environmentals that we've done. Our environmental specialist has already been to the site and feels that a supplemental, a letter to the file can.
And it has an industrial feel to it when you see the picture.
Yeah.
As opposed to a mountain view.
Right, exactly. That's a very good point, yeah.
So that'll limit the
Don't
LOP.
they have any taste in where they take up residence?
They let their PG&E facilities,
So we've had to produce a Gantt chart, which Peter's referring to, which shows the schedule of this project. And we've blocked out from November through March for inclement weather. We've also blocked out from, I think it's March through June for Peregrine Falcon.
August
Is
through
that-
July.
Yeah, so we can't, in our Gantt chart, we're not constructing during those periods because we're anticipating a peregrine landing and nesting on the dam again. So I think we're taking into account,
So it's a 2-month construction time.
yeah, and a 4-year period to get this done. That's one of the reasons. This project, if it wasn't for those limiting factors, might be done a year to permit and a year to construct, and you're done. So this could be a 2-year project, depending on nesting habits.
Okay.
I'll move on to overall cost and potential risks. Here's our current construction cost estimate. For the past several months, this total has been bouncing around the $37 million range. Last month it was at 37.3. This one is at 37.8. This is the Out Valley expense tracking. This shows exactly how much this ties into that forecast, and it shows how much is owed to each of the contractors at this point. And this ties into our forecast and our U.S. expense tracking.
Michael, is it fair to say that there's a greater probability that this will go down a little bit rather than go up a bit?
I'll get to that when I get to the risk.
What does the total say that we owe all the contractors at this point?
11,640.
11,640,000.
Yep. So the Out Valley expense comparison, September forecast compared to October forecast and the variance, it represents a $473,000 increase. Different reasons for this increase is at this point we're getting all of our bids were done on a unit bid price. So now we're getting the true ups. If the Out Valley line was additional lines or additional conduit was installed, everything was done on a unit price bid. If additional rock was encountered at the substation, these are being trued up at this time. We saw additional grinding of additional AC depth. I think I mentioned, and Michelle did as well, that we had 30-inch sections of asphalt along Caltrans. This additional cost is now reflected in this amount. We had additional chip sealing needed on Bear River Road and additional chip sealing on private land. We basically went on to pour asphalt and destroyed it and had to do additional chip sealing to get it back into shape and get releases from these people. We had to put another cabinet on EID property. I think we talked about that 2 meetings ago, where we put in an additional sectionalizing cabinets because the bends were too much and we couldn't make the run. KM Blue and KM Green substations. The KM Green substation, the rock, was incredible out there. We've gotten a change order due to the rock excavation. PG&E facilities for the substations has increased due to the time that they've spent on this protection relay. We had to do additional paving, and the ITCC tax on the above issues for this year has amounted to that change.
But on this chart, the only real opportunity is if Congress votes to lower the tax.
There is another opportunity, and that is with the risks that we discussed in August. One of those risks was the culvert crossings, and we were able to mitigate that risk by getting an agreement with Caltrans. However, the district has suffered as far as we have an additional risk that our conduit is above those culverts, and if Caltrans ever wants to move those culverts, granted, if they ever want to make them bigger, they typically go down. But if they did want to, we have a liability, and we've asked Q&D to assist on the paving costs, so we do have an opportunity there. So financial risks, the substation costs for PG&E have not been totally settled. Financial reconciliation, I think we're seeing the financial reconciliations. We've seen them for the substation and the overhead. The underground is the only one left to be done. ITC costs, right now we're anticipating the 34%. If Congress passes the bonus depreciation, it could go down. So this is a risk that we have to pay 34, but we're anticipating that. It could go down to 22%. As Michelle talked about at several meetings ago, RCI costs are being finalized at this point, and we will have additional EEC costs because of all the help that they've done with this communication issue and the revision of the IA. So that's kind of the financial risks. I think there are some opportunities for savings in there as well, and at that point I'll open up for questions.
Michael, are those risks baked into this last estimate, the 37.8, or no?
The ITCC, the underground RCI and EEC have not, and the substation are not.
Jill, I sent Michael an email last night. I'd love a cash forecast reconciliation on this as soon as possible. Maybe just send it one way to the board and the finance committee. But I am looking at $2,061,000 in the special trustee account as of the August balance sheet, and then $5,250,000 we borrowed in B8 loan in September, so after the August balance sheet, and then $2,750,000 left, which leaves $10,061,000 of sources. And if we owe $11,640,000, we would be $1.6 million short. And I don't think any of us want that to happen.
I believe that we will be short, especially with these additional costs that we have here now, that we will be into our 3.2 reserve, and due to the additional costs and then the risks that we've identified.
Okay, so my request is for a capital project cash flow completion forecast as soon as possible. With that, I'll open up to the board for any other questions or comments. The audience?
I have a question. I should have asked it earlier, but when you were going through the operations and the maintenance, my recollection is, and I could be incorrect, but when the budget was built this year for under electrical, there was an indication that there was going to be a position eliminated. So based upon all the information that you just shared with us, is that still the case, or do you think you're still going to need the type of the personnel that you currently have?
I think we already eliminated that position.
Okay.
We did that in January of 2014. We did that early.
Okay.
We eliminated those positions because of the drought situation. We thought that we could manage, which we actually were able to. But yeah, we did eliminate that position. So we'll go into this next fiscal year with 21 full-time employees, and I think that'll be sufficient.
Thank you.
Have you covered B3 and 4, which is BA drawdown schedule, or?
No, that'll be next.
Okay.
Here's the B8 loan drawdown schedule for the $8 million loan. We have still left to be drawn is the 2.75, which will be drawn within the next 2 weeks, it's anticipated. And this has resulted in a 3% interest rate. So the only other item on this is the powerhouse useful life, the monthly depreciation accrual. I think we've discussed this. This has been sent out to the RUS for their consideration. So, and I think Dave finalized this, and he is, the results is a composite depreciation rate between 2 and 2.26%.
So that's 8B. Any additional questions from the board or the audience? Thank you. You know, Michael, the only other thing is, can you put this presentation maybe on box, and perhaps would it make sense to put it on the website or not? I mean, it's very, frankly, informative piece on where we are with the project. I'd encourage you to put it on the website if you see a reason not to. Moving on to 8C.
So the U.S. Forest Service Special Use Operations and Maintenance, before the board today is the special use permit from the U.S. Forest Service. Part of this permit is the long-term operations and maintenance plan, which details our relationship and permitted activities in the forest. Class 1, regular maintenance activities. This is routine inspections, snow removal, minor repairs, vegetation management, road repairs along the corridors in the hazard tree zone. The overhead has a 60-foot on the 34K and an 80-foot corridor on the 115. The underground has a 30-foot corridor. The Class 2 repairs would be repairs and maintenance of the existing facility. This would be a pole replacement. If we lost a pole, conductor replacement, if we lost some line, vegetation maintenance, road maintenance. Class 3 would be major maintenance and reconstruction activities. This would be several poles. This would be a restringing of an entire line. Class 4 would be emergency repairs and accelerated repairs. And so this all is identified in this long-term O&M, which is before the board today. It's part of our special use permit. What it does is it calls for annual operations meeting. It calls for a meeting prior to any major activities. It calls for us to have awareness training so that we can identify species that might be threatened or wildlife. Sensitive resource identification, and we're threatened and endangered species, fire prevention and protection, and what we can do during periods of declared fire season. Emergency work and notification procedures, limited operating periods, which we've had quite a bit of experience with, heritage resources, vegetation management, and invasive weeds and things that we would actually be looking for in invasive weeds. As far as these, they actually have to be plotted on our GPS, and then these has already been done by RCI, so we actually have that data that we can transfer to the Forest Service. So with that, the district staff recommends approval of Resolution 1423, allowing President O'Grady to sign the special use, long-term special use permit with the United States Forest Service.
Any questions or comments?
Yeah, the question I have, basically has to do with paragraph E, which is on page 47 of the packet, and then paragraph I, which is on page 48, has to do with the risk and the, damage to United States property and insurance. I'm assuming that if the worst happened, it's for some reason something about our overhead line caused a forest fire. What would be our liability?
I don't know what our total liability would be as far as the cost of suppression, the cost of revegetation. I don't know what our total liability is. I know we don't have insurance for the overhead portion of it.
But I mean, it would be huge. It could be huge.
It could be huge. Yeah, I mean, the latest estimates was $50 million a day fighting that fire down in El Dorado County.
And is there any way that, assuming that we do everything using best practices, et cetera, that our liability can be limited in that manner?
I would assume so. I mean, PG&E, any provider of power has the same liability with their overhead sections. So as long as we're doing, providing for the operations and maintenance as I've described in my reports, I think that we have a good case that if it's an act of God, I don't think we can be held liable.
Well, an act of God would be, lightning hitting a pole and the pole falling down or something like that. But what if a spark flies out from the overhead for some reason and it's particularly dry out there and it flies into the forest and it starts a fire, and et cetera? Could you ask Dick Shanahan what he thinks? I'd just feel better if I knew that as long as we adhere to best practices and adhere to the aspects of this use permit about maintenance of vegetation and so on, somehow our liability would be somewhat limited.
Understood.
Have you looked into insurance for that?
We did. In fact, we had Aqua's JPIA come
And
up.
they said it's not insurable. Any other questions from the board or comments?
So there's no way to check with another company regarding insurance? Is their word it?
I think this is just a structural thing in the industry that we came across fairly early and understood that, even as odd as it seemed, that there just was no way to insure overhead transmission lines. Nobody does it, and it's case closed.
Effectively.
Yeah, we've checked with PG&E, Liberty Energy, Nevada Energy, and so we don't know of anyone that actually insures overhead lines.
Okay, so any other questions or comments from the audience? So would you like to make a motion to approve Resolution 1423, approving the electric transmission line permit, long-term special use permit from the U.S. Department of Agriculture Forest Service?
I will move that we adopt Resolution 1423.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. So we'll go to 8G, which is discussion and possible action regarding the district's snow removal services operation, Valley-wide residential service. This is an update.
So this is actually what it looks like.
What it's supposed to look like.
This is our timeline, as detailed in the memo in your packet. The district must take several steps to complete the studies to move this along. We have a service charge study, basically determining how much this will be, rules resolution determining the one vote per parcel, and other rules with regards to the voting process. The service area map will be presented, a public hearing, community outreach during this winter season, public hearing and protest hearing, the call of the election, and conduct an election, and then the implementation of the new service. We're currently taking measurements of all the common areas and snow removal areas to place this data, which will be tied in by APN numbers to produce a service area map. And with the help of Bob Epstein, this data will be stored in a report server so the changes can be easily made and tied into the building software. This will help to determine the rate schedule for the service and charge study, and Dick Shanahan is currently producing the rules resolution, the one vote per parcel, etc. These will all be presented to the planning and finance committees and then to the board of the next two meetings for a potential public hearing in January. And with that, I open it up for discussion.
Mike, I guess just one question, having looked at the county data now for a week. It just seems like there's a huge amount of detail in trying to resolve discrepancies. And so to have all of that data available in order to do an actual analysis, it just feels a little bit ambitious. So this time schedule sort of works to working backwards from having approved rates for the next year's snow season. I mean, that's what we're solving for, that as opposed to an analysis of what we need to do and how long it will take.
And what I anticipated, how long it would take.
Yeah.
I know that we can measure the asphalt, and we can measure and try to determine how many customers we're going to have and do it. So I still feel confident that we can make this schedule as far as the data that we need in the field.
Yeah, okay. And so we would come up with a model of how many square feet of snow removal of different categories, what our costs are to do that, and then divide that into the base.
Right.
And that's the major calculation.
That's the major.
Okay.
And I got an email from Bertrand. You remember Bertrand expressed some concerns last time. I got an email, maybe others did too, I can't remember if it was to everybody. But his major concern for the folks in KMA, and maybe for all the HOAs, is that the road portion of this service charge study would be spread out over all lots, built and unbuilt, which is the way KMA does it now. It's the way East Meadows does it now. I'm sure others do it probably similarly. And in the committee meeting, you confirmed that that's the way, the approach you're taking, right?
Yeah, and I also got that email. I replied back to him, and he said, if it is APN based and not KMPUD based, then I withdraw my stated objection. But that's what we're currently doing, is taking the county ID numbers and applying them against all our known properties and trying to match them up. Some of them match. The county spells some of the street names differently than we do. There's a lot of interesting stuff. It can all be resolved. It's going to take a fair amount of reeling in to get the last 30%.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. So based upon those comments, is the thinking then that there's more APN numbers than you currently have ratepayers?
Well, there are, because APN numbers would include, open properties, vacant properties that don't have service on them.
Okay.
And the question is to confirm that those properties that benefit from snow removal pay their fair share, as opposed to only those people that have, current services. And we're confirming that it would be based on all beneficial properties based on their APN numbers and not just our current customer base.
And I have one other question, and I now have my KMA hat on. So KMA owns Chicken Feathers, the Chicken Feathers lot. So is there an anticipation that, and you do currently snowplow that, and we charge our homeowners, so would KMA have a vote? And if not, why not?
Well, typically in these, that common areas would be common areas, just like your roads, that everyone in KMA would pay for 1/64 or 1/64, or whatever it be, of the Chicken Feathers lot, so that their associations would not actually have a contract with the district for snow removal services. Their members would pay for their portion of that snow removal.
Okay.
I think there's an implied question, let me ask it. In terms of the actual vote to approve this, the owner of the land would be the person voted, or not?
Well, if it has an APN number.
Right.
Yeah, the owner of the land.
So, and we would use the county has an address of where they send property tax bills to. We would use those addresses. So if you're an affected property and you pay county taxes, which by definition you are, then that address would get a ballot to vote.
So it would have to be, because now that you said the tax rolls, because, yeah, KMA has probably, not quite a dozen, but taxes that we pay, very small amounts. So you would have to figure out whether it's those parcels would get the benefit of the snow removal. So I know Chicken Feathers would. I don't know about the other 11.
That's where I mean is there's a lot of,
Yeah.
we know every potential property that is currently being taxed, and then we have to figure out which ones would receive benefit and how much benefit, and divide it out, and then those property owners would get a ballot.
And that's all depending on Dick Shanahan's view of the rules resolution.
Right.
It'd be centered around his work as far as establishing the rules for the vote itself.
Well, I guess my reaction is, I guess I would thinking about KMA, I would strongly encourage, at least from the chicken feathers, that we get a vote in there. Just,
Well, I would think you would. I mean, just like KCP will get a vote for every parcel it owns.
Yeah.
It's not an individual, it's a,
Yeah, every parcel owner would be voting on this, and we need a majority vote of parcel owners for which we intend to provide the service.
So I'm curious, what, and you stated that there were another 11 or 12 properties that KMA owns.
and we pay property taxes on it every year.
What's it, for instance, is just like undeveloped lots that somehow KMA took possession of at some point?
Right, and I think one of them is what we refer to as the J lot. So that goes down, part of it goes down Kirkwood Meadows Drive, part of it goes down the meadow. There's other, I think maybe Chicken Feathers is part of that J lot. And where some of the other parcels are, it's not entirely clear to me.
If you'd like to see the list, I can email.
I'd like to see this.
I'll do that, and I can, so I'll send that to the board.
Just to understand what we're getting into. Sounds a little ominous. Your vote may have been right.
Well, I'm not opposed to the project, but I kind of question
remember how you voted.
the timing and the priorities that we're faced with right now. I see this as potentially becoming a contentious issue, given the variety of snow removal needs in the valley. But I don't want to feed into that.
Well, it's Michael's job to make it as least contentious as possible.
I
We have
think
the perfect man for the
I
job.
think I can safely say that in the next 2 months, we'll be able to analyze it, model it, and then be able to say, what does it look like? At that point, we can decide whether to move forward or not.
Without committing a lot of money to it.
Exactly. I think that's a good.
Yeah.
We're committing staff time and I would say board time
Okay.
to the project. I haven't seen any checks written.
Yeah.
So I don't think, there's minimum, except for legal review, we're not investing any actual.
And I think the important spot is where Bob came, is mentioning is the analysis and seeing where it actually comes out. And if we feel that the product is sellable and good for the community, at that point, then the board can make a decision on whether to move forward.
But at that time, we'll have a model for every single property and say, this is exactly where we think your services are, what they cost and what the benefit is, and you can compare that to your current rates.
Okay.
Can I make one other statement? The district seems to, and the board too, from my vantage point, you seem to discount to a certain degree, whether it's each of you or the staff. I mean, there is a cost to that, and I guess as you move forward on projects, you think about being able to, calculate what that is, because there is a cost to that. In my professional life, I face that, and sometimes it's you think it takes only X, but gee, it took a lot more than that.
I don't disagree with that, but I would also say understanding how snow removal works and anticipating future needs. If we're the only snow removal provider, we need to understand what it actually looks like. And computerizing this whole system is a benefit regardless of how we operate in the future. So this isn't lost. If we end up not moving forward, a large amount of the labor expended will improve our operations afterwards, which is why I'm willing to pitch in.
Thank you. Anything else on snow removal?
No.
How about update on the project to pursue Cable's Lake water rights with the State Water Board? This is also an update.
Can we go to H?
I'm sorry, did I miss one? Discussion and possible approval of Resolution 1421, approving revisions to the employee manual, including a change to the housing utility credits policy.
Current district policy calls for a housing credit of $200 and a utility credit of $200 monthly for employees who live in the valley and are considered critical to the operation by the general manager. This policy is very complicated and takes into account roommates, additional staff members in the same unit, deduction of utility bills, proof of payment, etc. Staff has been working with the Personnel Committee to simplify the policy to a straight $400 per month for critical employees. It seems to be very straight line. We've run this by the employees. There's not really any impact. If anything, it's positive for the employees. We have run this by the Personnel Committee. Actually, the Personnel Committee came up with the idea of just simplifying it to a straight $400. And so staff feels it's a streamlined approach and recommends approval of Resolution 1421.
Yeah, the Personnel Committee considered it. Eric thought it up, simplified, and we recommend approval. Any questions or comments from the audience or the board?
Sorry.
We're going to give you a frequent speaker badge.
So, I think earlier it was shared that you have 21 full-time employees, and so I'm just curious, out of the 21, how many does it impact?
More than half,
Okay.
I would think. How many people will you have in the valley? Staff is counting.
Yeah,
15?
that's
So-
kind of what I remember from the list, is
Yeah.
substantially more than half, 3/4.
But I cannot stress the importance of on-site staff in Kirkwood enough. Yeah, I just can't stress it enough.
Great, then I'll entertain a motion to approve Resolution 1421.
I'd like to move that we approve resolution number 1421.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Now on to Caples Lake Water Rights, 8I.
So we had our kickoff meeting completed in mid-September. We put the team together, the band's back together. Nick Bonsignor is our water rights engineer. Joanne Michael is our environmental specialist. Dick Shanahan is our general counsel, and Matt Wheeler is our water engineer. Staff asked Nick and Joanne to write up a timeline and process for the project. These are contained in your packet. From the permitting standpoint, these activities were identified. Largest one would be the division, which is the Water Rights Division, to review for required findings, for us to resubmit the findings as need be. This all equals up to 1.5 to 3 years, depending on the protests received. From our initial contact with the counties and with the different water agencies, I think our protests will be minimal, so I think hopefully we'll be down to the lower of those two figures. On the environmental side, Joanne put together, this equals up to about 10 months or longer, which would be done consecutively. This would be what we feel would be a pretty minimal environmental impact. As far as the only environmental impact would be the construction of the project itself down by well number 2, as everything else is in existing facilities. This all starts with a project description. Staff will be putting that together. The goal is to have the application to the state by the end of January of 2015. The project description has to talk about our water source investigation in the valley, of where we've looked for water in the past, the results of our capacity study that Matt Wheeler has done, the history and the result, the Project 184, or Lead to Save Sierra Lakes outcome, the current use of the snowmaking system, the project description, what would we actually be doing, what we would actually be installing, the specific water appropriation. Right now we're looking at 130 acre-feet a year, and what the diversion, the appropriation and the diversion request would be, the construction timeline and equipment that would be used, and then the operations and maintenance of that equipment once it's put into place. So that's what the project description will be doing, and that's what staff will be working on.
One question, Del. I thought at one point we discussed that we need to do some amount of water treatment. Isn't that an additional facility here?
That is the project itself, is the project description. That would be a water treatment facility down by well number 2. So Matt Wheeler would be the one that would be designing that. Not so much designing at this stage, but just talking about what the environmental impacts of that construction would be. So we have to talk about it, but I don't think we have to design the actual facility.
We must put a line item in the long-term capital plan that sized this, right? Remind me what the figure was for the construction phase.
For the construction itself, I think it was $140,000. The project that's been approved by the board is the permitting of this,
Right.
and we have a $50,000 cap on that.
Right.
But the actual water treatment plant, I think, was $240,000. I'd have to look at the capital plan and research that.
Anything that the planning committee would like to add or subtract?
No, I think this is a good path for us to be moving down and, getting our hands around whether or not this can be done and what the scope of this is going to be. It's worthy cause.
Yeah, I think our main conversation about it was just to be sure that we don't spend anything that we don't have to
Right.
spend. That really the purpose of this is to secure the rights, but not to do anything else at this point.
Great.
So the minimum necessary to do that.
Any comments, questions from the board or the audience on this? So we'll move on to manager reports. General manager report, Michael.
So our aquifer levels for the drought is actually at 131 feet. And if you've been tracking this as closely as Operations and Capital and staff has, that's good news. It's been down as low as 127, but actually it really hasn't dropped this year yet. So we're very pleased by the level of our aquifer. And hopefully that's a sign that it is protected from this kind of a drought. The construction notice has gone out. Construction notice limits excavation of any district facilities by contractors after October 15th. So Timber Ridge Townhomes, which is currently being built, has a limit of till October 15th to get their facilities in for utilities. They can do all they want with foundations, but it just can't affect the utilities after that date. Talking about Timber Creek Townhomes, they are still installing their utilities. Hopefully they will meet the October 15th date. They've had some issues, but they're still marching along. Timber Ridge condominiums have actually taken out the pavers on the backside of that building and are installing asphalt so that we can actually do snow removal on the backside of that building. And we have just recently signed an agreement with them for snow removal services. So talking about snow removal contracts, we have received all but 2 contracts for the entire valley. So every association that has snow removal services at this point is contracted with the district. So we will see a large increase in activities in snow removal, hopefully it snows appropriately.
On the Timber Ridge, where they're making the modification that you described, is about a 3-story tall building there. Is there any hazard of roof avalanches, employee liabilities? They're running equipment up there to clear snow?
I guess that comes into question a lot of different properties around. Not, that's where they divert people in case of a fire. They put them to we are actually creating the fire egress. So I don't remember seeing any large avalanches coming off that in the past. Of course, if there were, we'd take appropriate actions, but I don't see any untold risks.
And they've installed snow fences on the roof this year as well.
Did you hear what Cheryl?
Yeah.
So unless there's any questions, that's the general manager's report.
Michael, so under the snow removal contracts, it looks like, so what I'm hearing is, you've only got 2 that doesn't look like are coming to fruition. So is that the reason why you're hiring this? Or you're looking for that extra body to help out future? Okay. Thank you.
We're actually looking for 2 people.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
And do you expect to get those 2 or not?
Well, yeah, we'll get those 2.
No, the 2 contracts that are
Oh, yeah.
outstanding. So it's
Oh, yeah. I don't think it's a matter of that they're not coming, it's just a matter that they haven't come yet.
Oh, okay. Oh,
So
wow.
I anticipate 100% of the value will be under the, and yes, I anticipate we'll get the 2 people. We are doing equipment maintenance right now on the existing equipment. We're looking for personnel. We have secured housing for additional people, and we're going to start snow staking probably next week or the week after. So,
Michael, is it Sun Meadows, the condominium complex that had the parking garage, and a parking garage roof that needs to have snow removal? And I know you were very reluctant to take that on a couple of years ago. I think they requested that possibility. Has anything changed on that, or would we decline to do that?
the staff is still reluctant to put any equipment on that deck from previous experience. So, yeah, so it's not part of those contracts. Vail is actually doing that work. We don't actually have the equipment that could go on that anyway. It takes a snowcat. It takes a snowcat with a very wide track, and you know, it takes a specialized piece of equipment to go on that whatsoever. And I'd hate to be the guy that has a snowcat inside the wrong end of a garage. So.
Why don't you keep going?
As far as the operations report, Assistant Manager Rick Ansel isn't here today. We are doing fire department hiring. We're hiring one individual, as has been discussed. That individual will work Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays during the winter season. We have started with chipping. We've done 30 different properties of chipping. There's probably 30 more piles up there, and there's piles materializing as we speak. We will be doing a recovery clean on our wastewater treatment plant membranes next week. That's our first recovery clean. That's the use of citric acid and chlorine to keep our membranes in pristine shape. We're working on our absorption beds so that we can do our monitoring of the levels in the absorption beds remotely. That helps so that we don't have to access those monitoring wells in the snow during the winter season. And then we're just getting ready for the winter. Snow stakes, we put down the playground is gone. We're doing all those things that buttoning up for the snow season. We're not starting any large projects. As I mentioned, operations and capital, all capital projects have been curtailed for next year, until the spring so we can get ready.
So Michael, what decision was made regarding the on-call schedule, elimination or not eliminating that one on-call person? Because as I shared in the planning committee meeting, that it seemed if this position was to represent an enhancement to the valley, to the community, to everyone who visits, that it would seem like, especially on a Friday and a Saturday and a Sunday, that the near guarantee of having 3 people respond versus 2 near guarantee, 3 seems better than 2 when you have more bodies here. And you also have the potential for another event.
So we discussed this in the planning committee, of course, but that was only 3 days ago. I have no idea if any discussions have taken place subsequent to that being raised. And we took the action item to have it discussed amongst the various committees that had a stake in this.
Well, I think Rick stated that he had a lot of people show interest in the job for this, which would be a standby person.
Yeah, if we
That's what that's
hire,
to
the
fill that.
plan is to hire this person, this
Right.
temporary person. The question that Nancy's raising is, are we going to curtail the on-call schedule as a way to fund the hire of that person? Apparently a decision was made somewhere, I think, in the personnel committee perhaps, that was, or maybe finance, that was required to make the equation balance so that we were paying money to bring in this new employee, but saving the money by curtailing.
I don't know.
So this fire department hiring was part of the personnel committee, and at the planning committee, when this issue came up, I mentioned that I would be bringing it back before personnel to discuss that issue.
Okay.
So it'll go back before personnel.
So in the meantime, everything is the status quo.
Yeah, we haven't hired the person yet.
Right.
But we don't have a personnel committee meeting till December.
Yeah, we can certainly, since it's, the three of us, we can
Do it on the phone
do it on
beforehand?
the phone or call another one.
Yeah.
Since personnel committees are, they're an ad hoc committee and they're not public, so.
Okay, so I'll leave it to you to call that meeting.
And what we also shared in the finance committee meeting, the cost was about $1,780 for the entire, and it seems like
And you said you discussed that in the finance committee or planning?
I'm sorry, if I said finance, I meant planning. I'm looking at Bob and got the wrong Bob, sorry. And that the barbecue did better than expected. And also the chipper didn't cost as much. And it just seemed like for that amount of money, less than $2,000, the benefit to the community would be huge.
And your recommendation is what?
To retain that on-call, whatever that on-call shift is, to retain that, don't eliminate it, keep it.
And that would be the third person you're talking about?
Right.
Okay. Anything else on operations, or excuse me, any other comments or questions from the audience? Anything else on operations report, Michael?
Just that we are nearing the completion of the water meter upgrade project, and we only have about 30 left to go. So that is this is the result of the hay truck corner, the latest victim of the hay truck corner, if you know where that is. That used to be a full truck, and now it's somewhat different.
It's a disassembled truck.
Yeah, this is a disassembled truck. This is a truck that was heading downhill with a load of fertilizer and could not make the turn and landed in the bank. District fire department volunteers responded to this along with massive help and had to cut the roof off of this vehicle to get the driver out. So that was quite the mangle.
When was that? Was he okay?
She was okay, and it was just a week and a half ago.
And where is this?
Hay truck corner is, if you go that way, go up and over,
Yeah.
as you're heading down, there is a huge,
Yeah.
right before you get to Oyster Creek.
Yeah.
And when do you turn off the irrigation water?
Irrigation water, I think that'll start next week. It's mandated, I think it actually might be November 1st, but we might do it early, based on, customer usage. If they haven't been using it, we'll turn them on.
So, I'm sorry. Steve.
Go ahead.
I think you mentioned the water meter project, and I think there was some information in the board packet that was published. And there was a customer on the KMA side who said, basically, I don't want to do it. This is required, isn't it? Or can you opt out?
They have brought up an issue on water meters that we still need to investigate and get back and do a report. So there have been, I think, 2 owners that have asked not to have that installed. Whether they will be charged a fee not to have that installed or not is a question for the board at a future time.
So in other words, you could build it into the rates, or you...
So we'd have to actually do a meter read and enter that in.
Right.
And I think for the community's benefit, if that cost us any more administration or maintenance time, then there would be a fee associated with that.
Got it. Thank you.
Wasn't aware of that issue. Anything else on operations?
Nope.
Propane, electric. Brandy? Welcome.
Morning.
Good morning.
So I'll give a quick update on the powerhouse and then an update on our permit modification with Great Basin. So at the powerhouse, we are finishing up generator repairs for the summer. We have finished all the CAT warranty repairs, and the Volvo number 7 replacement was completed under warranty. We do still have the old Volvo number 7 sitting outside. We're working with PowerSecure to get that shipped, hopefully before it snows. Next Tuesday, a PowerSecure subcontractor will be on site. He will be here to address the remaining warranty issues on the Volvos, mostly minor oil and coolant leaks, but there are a few more serious. He's also going to be doing some routine maintenance in the form of a top-end valve adjustment for us on those. We just dealt with a PLC communication issue. Back the week of 9/26, Wilson was wiring in the new switchgear to our current DC system, and they caused a short which took out our PLC that controls our automatic breaker function at the powerhouse and our generator control. So we had a series of outages over that week when we were able to initially bypass the PLC, which gave us manual control of the powerhouse, and then PowerSecure was on site within 2 days to further troubleshoot, replace a PLC, and replace a blown fuse. So we are actually, we requested a spare parts quote for the whole communication system there, and we've gotten that from PowerSecure. We'll be reviewing it and determining which parts we need to keep on the shelf as we go forward into the Out Valley operation, because this PLC is critical for the automatic function, which we talked about, the load dependent start stop, so that the powerhouse comes on if the Out Valley goes down.
PLC is programmable logic controller.
Yes, sir. Any questions on the powerhouse? Okay. We're also working with Great Basin on our permit. We have an operation permit for the powerhouse, which is currently an unlimited operation of the powerhouse. It's our prime power source. We are looking into going to a emergency only, a backup power plan type of permit with Great Basin. They've been very supportive of this move. What it would do is it would modify our testing requirements, so we would not any longer have to do daily calibrations on the 4 systems. Our annual testing would potentially be reduced to more of a 5-year plan, and it would limit our non-emergency use of the generators. So each generator would have a 50-hour per year use limit for non-emergency use, so for maintenance and testing purposes, but emergency use would be unlimited. And we have given that permit application to Great Basin. They are required to do a 30-day public comment period on that. So we're awaiting the results from them. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, that concludes my report.
Any questions from the board or the audience?
Just a curiosity question. So as the staff is moving from what they've been doing to what they are going to be doing, do you sense, what's your sense about how they're feeling about it?
We've spoken to all of our staff. The people who are going to be most impacted are the operators who work swing and graveyard shifts right now. All of them know that in the winter season, especially with all the new snow removal, we'll be leaning on them heavily for snow removal type activities. And in the summertime, we expect that we will have routine operations and maintenance of both the powerhouse, the in-valley distribution system, and the transmission line. So I've spoken to all of them. All of them appear to be comfortable with the direction we're going.
So why don't we move on to administrative report? Thank you, Brandy.
Hi. I will go ahead and start with the performance reporting for August. It's starting page 179 of the packet. And August electric generation, we actually metered 320,517 kilowatt hours, and that did meet plan by 5,000 kilowatt hours. our year-to-date so far has met plan. There's an error in one of these calculations that shows that our variance metered versus budget is positive 317,000. It's actually just about at plan at 1,300. For August, our unmetered percentage for electric was great. It was 1%. And while that's great and we're happy with it,
Doesn't square.
yeah, we still are looking into what the issues are for unmetered. In September, it did go back up higher than the 1%. So I just wanted to bring that up. And our average kilowatt hour per gallon right now is 13. Our goal is 14. For propane, our actual metered for August was 332,597. It was down from plan, but for our year-to-date, we are still above plan by about 26,000 cubic feet. Our unmetered percentage is 4%. Our average for the year right now is 6%. Propane costs have been down the summer months. In July, we did do a propane rate decrease of 7.5% or 7.5 cents. And the last 2 months, we have also been able to give an additional credit for the decrease in propane. So our usage, our variable rate, the last 2 months have been about 5.5 cents. Unless there's any questions, I'll go into financials.
Can I just, again, a curiosity question. I do a lot of walking over by Chair 7 and over by Chair 9. And as I walk around, I see, there is electrical over there. There is water in the middle of the, out there. And I say, is that really being metered?
Where at?
So if I go just to the right of, is it Tiber Creek? You can, and to the up by Chair 7, or if I got them right, correct, you can find the round water, and you can find the green, I think that's the electrical pieces all up through there. And I used to think, oh, these are just, someone's brought them there and thrown them down. But you can see that there's been concrete put around them.
Sure. So there's a couple of things you might be seeing up there. As Director Dornbrook knows, that used to be absorption beds up there, and there are cans up there, monitoring wells for absorption beds that they actually put on the ski hill way back in the 90s. They've been abandoned for many years. The water system, the district's water system actually goes around that hole and then comes back into the sprung structures, and it goes around and goes into it. So you might see some of our facilities up there as far as water. And we go all the way over to a fire hydrant on the far north side of the sprung structure. As far as wastewater, everything is downhill, of course. It wouldn't be there. Electrical, we have electrical facilities going up to the chairlift, but our facilities end at the chairlift itself at a transformer. So I don't know if that helps, hopefully.
Well, I guess what I'm really saying is that, have you walked it? Are you absolutely sure? Could that be where it is? I mean, you think about all the development that's gone on over the years. It's not very far up the hill. I mean, and I keep running into them, and every time I see them, I go, I hope this is being captured if it should be captured.
Well, I'm all over the mountain. I will definitely take a look.
Thank you.
For August financials, starting with the balance sheet, our total operating cash balance as of August is $2.66 million. It does meet plan by 40,000, so we're right in line. The total trustee special construction account, or our RUS account, does show that it's under plan. That's just because we assumed in the budget that we were going to pull the full B8 loan in August. In September, we did receive $5.25 million in RUS funds, and we have an additional $2.75 to draw we did get confirmation from Russ that that has been approved. We just need to give them the okay when we need to pull it.
If we are substantially over the loan amount, could you let us know why?
Yes. Our accounts payable balance shows that it's over plan, obviously due to the Out Valley. A big portion of that is most of our Out Valley contracts have a 10% retention that we have booked but haven't paid, but it is in this balance. And again, under our non-current liabilities, our long-term debt is showing $50.5 million when we thought we were going to have the $58 million drawn. And you'll see in the income statements that that does have an impact on our interest expense. For the income statement, our combined, for August, we did hit our overall operating revenues. We exceeded plan by 14,000. And we kept our operating expenses down by 20,000. So for August overall, we are above plan by 98,000. 58,000 of that is in our interest expense. Two reasons for that: we didn't pull all of the funds that we planned on, and also the auditors have found that we have been expensing more than we should be, so they've done an adjustment. We're actually capitalizing interest on the Russ loan until the project is complete. A question came up during the Finance Committee meeting about commercial revenue. It does show that it's down 67,000 from plan for the year. It's kind of a timing issue. The way we budget, we do budget per month, but we show commercial for the year, we say is 59%. And in the summer months, it just doesn't come up to 59%, but it does catch up in the winter. Salary and wages for the year and payroll taxes is down from plan. The majority of that is due to a lot of the staff spending time on the Out Valley, so that time is capitalized. And under our other non-operating income, it shows that we are above plan by 23,000 for the month. That's due to us receiving connection fees for the TC townhomes. And I'll just go into a couple of things I noticed on individuals. For the fire department on page 185, barbecue revenue shows that it is up from plan by 21,000. This is the excess of our fire barbecue. So after the chipper was purchased, we were above plan by about 17,000 for the barbecue.
So you expense that, the chipper?
I'm sorry?
You expense the chipper?
It was used, the donations.
Okay.
Used, yeah. For wastewater, on page 189, our year-to-date operations and maintenance and our contract services expense is up from plan. Operation maintenance is above plan by about 7,000. We had to replace some VFDs over there. And our contract services, Bennett Engineering, Matt Wheeler's new company has, their expenses are higher than we thought, and we have worked on that to decrease those costs. Year-to-date for wastewater, our net loss is 6,000 more than planned. For electricity, on page 191, we have been able to meet our operating revenues so far. We've exceeded by 7,000. We've also been able to keep our expenses down. So total operating is up 16,000 from plan year to date. As the board is aware, we are allocating 100% of property taxes to electric at this time. So that's shown under other non-operating income. It shows that there is 152,000 for the year compared to the 141. That excess is the connection fees for the TC townhomes. And as mentioned before, the interest expense is down quite a bit from plan, about 100,000 from plan. Again, due to not pulling as much of the rest funds right away, and the change in capitalizing interest. Not a lot to mention on propane, except for we are meeting plan. We're above plan by 14,000 for the year.
On a net income basis, right?
Yes.
Can I ask a question? Because you, and I realize why you did it, but under snow removal, so when the budget was built for snow removal, is that now that it looks like you're gonna get everybody? Is that gonna be, we're anticipating that's gonna be a positive from an income? Is it gonna be a net, are we gonna net it to zero, or, or how are we thinking this is gonna turn out? I don't know if I'm clear, but.
Well, we budget for a net zero. If we have additional revenues and additional expenses, we will, at the end of the year, again, be at net zero because we have a not to exceed contract with our clients.
Okay.
So it'll all zero out. It's just that we're going to have increased volume on both sides of the equation.
Okay, thank you.
For the operating cash waterfall, I'm not sure if yours looks the same as mine. For some reason, I'm having some problems with the printout of this. Our actual August cash balance is 2.641 million. I'm not sure if that's showing on yours.
2620.
The actual August
Is
is
all one in box or something?
2,568,000.
Yeah, there's actually, that's not,
It's not showing it.
Oh.
Yeah, it's not showing it.
it's not showing up.
Oh, it's not showing up.
It does in my spreadsheet, but when we print it, for some reason, it's not. So the actual August cash balance
Oh, the
is.
9-1 is not showing. up.
Right, exactly.
Right, the 9-1.
Yeah.
So
It
it's
should be
2 point,
2641.
exactly. And that's 21,000 above plan. If you look at the updated forecast, in September, it is going below the 2 million just by 2,000, but it is showing that we're down from plan by 515,000. The reason for that is that we budgeted for the COP interest and principal payment to be paid in December. We had a wrong schedule. It was actually due in September, so we did pay that, but it does catch itself up in December because we're not paying that. Or in January, actually, I'm sorry.
Is this COP, was that a 7-year? I can't remember that. It's
It's a 10-year.
10 years.
10-year.
There's pieces every year that fall off. The longest piece is 10.
In September was our first principal payment. It was about $530,000.
On this one, for our November 8th meeting, could you give us a November 1st forecast or estimate,
Yes.
please? Does that conclude?
Yeah, I do have on mine an audit update, but if okay, I'll let Bob handle that in the finance.
Sorry. Thank you. Any questions for Jill on the financials, either the board or the audience? Or the performance report? So what do we have? Committee reports, communications?
We had a communications meeting this week, and one of the things we discussed is, since the go live day is November 1st, we might dedicate a lot of the newsletter to providing sort of the history of what happened. So Cheryl has volunteered, she's dug into the archives and pulled out a rough timeline, which I thought I would scrub a little bit and then maybe circulate, but we try to provide a perspective on how this got started and where we are. It's a little bit ambitious, but we're going to try to put it together and then get people's comments on that. Other I think there's anything, there's a few other suggestions. At the last board meeting, there was a request to look at how we post information to the website related to meetings, and so we met on that, where there's a number of tasks to look at, and we thought it would be appropriate to also document what we post and what we don't, and the rationale behind it. So Michael and I are going to work on that, but I told him his priority was to go out mailing. So in all likelihood, most of it probably won't get done until November, unless he overachieves, which is always possible and encouraged.
Planning, anything?
Yeah, we met also earlier this week. We talked about most of the things already during this meeting. Quick, like, in case you read anything about new laws that have just been put on the books about groundwater depletion, we did go to check to see whether or not we're having to comply with anything on those new laws. The answer is we're outside of the control district, so we have no obligation. Michael's continuing to look for some time sharing of a person to do grant funding work, so it'll probably be coming up to the board at some point soon. And on the Meadow Trail system, I did meet with Casey Bland and Peter Forsch. The follow-up items from there are basically to have us more flesh out our proposal so we can go to Casey. He's understandably quite reluctant to get into this topic, but we did agree we would overlay the cross-country ski and hiking trails and see if there's some opportunities there to do some creative things. And Cheryl and I are going to go out to the meadow and have some fun this afternoon with some maps and try to do just that.
Finance.
So the main update here is we did meet with the auditors yesterday, 2 days ago. So they have a draft of the audit for the last fiscal year that they presented to us, and we went through. And our original goal was to have a completed audit by this board meeting. We're a couple of weeks off from that, not due to lack of effort on anybody's part. So the current plan is they'll have a final statement by October 28th, which they'll present a week later to the Finance Committee. And then if we approve it, then that will be distributed at the next board meeting. I would say overall, things are in good shape. They did find some things, but you would expect that when you switch auditors. The quality of their work, I think, is a step up. I think we'd all agree from what we had before. And the quality of the people they have on site, my impression is everything's a step up. They did find some interesting things going all the way back to a 1994 land swap that we did that was not properly documented.
We own more land than we thought.
So I thought that was impressive. On internal controls, they did identify some things that we should do that we've already corrected. A good example is the fact that we didn't have the right rates for electricity for the majority of last year. That was a material weakness, as you would expect. So most of those suggestions we've already implemented. There's some other ones as well that seem good, but generally I was pleased. The other thing I would note is we have a negative net position, and I think this relates to Standish's observation that the amount of, if you took all of our current liabilities against all our current cash, there's a shortfall. And I think that's mostly a timing due to the Russ payments, but that's the main item that I noted within there that we want to reconcile. I think it'll work out just fine, but it's currently something we have to make sure we understand.
Can you say that again?
Well, we have a negative net position, which means if you took all of our liabilities and our current cash available to pay it.
So
that
you mean
it's
long-term life?
no. This is current liabilities. And so, but I think it's related to the fact that we haven't drawn down all the loans.
Okay.
And the expense, it's a timing issue related to cash flow. We have expense receipts from contractors, and we don't pay them until they're due. And so the timing of all of that creates the appearance of a shortfall on that we don't, but like Stanish requested, we'll verify. We don't have, if we had one, it would come out of reserves, whether we have one or not. We don't know. So that was the other item that they noticed.
No, it's funny, I mean, because it doesn't show up in the balance sheet that way, so.
No,
It's buried in
yeah.
a footnote, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, are you looking at their statement?
No, I'm just looking at our August.
Oh, okay.
balance sheet.
If you looked on page 4 of their preliminary audit, you would see that there's this negative balance in that one case. Anyway, I'm really pleased with the quality of what they did, and you're already aware of the major findings that they've had. So they're not, barring any other thing, finding in the next 2 weeks, we're in a good position to wrap it up by the next board meeting.
Operation Capital?
I think we covered most of the issues. I guess the only thing that we didn't talk about was the Chair 10 transformer. Dave can attest to that. It's slightly undersized, and the short-term remedy is to go through a procedure of firing it up a little slower. Maybe Dave could explain it better than I can.
Yeah, KMR has a variable frequency drive. We've discussed these numerous times to run these chairlifts. Those drives can be programmed to change the inrush that occurs when the motor starts. So one question for the ski area would be, how are you starting it? Because if you can minimize that inrush, then you minimize. I'm convinced that what's happening is the voltage is dropping on what Brandy calls a powder day. And in other words, your overall system voltage is a little bit lower because everything's on. And just that little difference is enough that Chair 10 won't start. So one thing to look at is to see if that drive can be adjusted to minimize that inrush. That could help them. We certainly know the transformer can serve the chairlift. There's enough capacity in there. I've discussed with Michael that if you were going to connect a new service to the ski area for a new 400 horsepower chairlift, you would spend 10% more and put in a slightly larger transformer. It gives you more of a margin of error. But to replace the transformer is fairly expensive.
And we own the transformer, not the customer.
That's correct.
Yeah, we own the transformer. Yes, correct.
So are we going, so based upon what you said, does that mean the district's going to try to go to the resort to say, start your engine slower?
The district will go to the resort to advise them if they don't want to have problems during this unique situation, that they should change their VFDs, their drive sequencings, to correct that. So the problem is that when Chair 10 goes down unexpectedly and everything's running on Brandy's powder day, it's hard to get the lift back running because of the inrush. But if they readjust their drive frequency or their drive startup procedures differently, it'll be a slower startup and they won't have to change their operations.
So are we thinking that will be received favorably?
Right now, it's their problem, so I would assume that they would, that they would receive that.
We've identified what the issue is. Yeah, okay.
There's other chairs at the same horsepower that are fed off the same size transformer. So the transformer can take that load, they just need to operate it differently.
Just the enthusiasm to get it going.
And while we have Dave here, remind me where we are on the harmonic stuff.
The power quality report is complete. The recommendations that need to continue moving forward was to actively engage with the ski area, because we can see the influence of their variable frequency drive operations. We know they're replacing a drive on lift 2, and I encourage the district staff to communicate with them about the importance again of filtering these things. The drive. Their interest is to make sure the chairlift works and works efficiently, and at the same time as these drives are being replaced and programmed, the filtering needs to be considered and needs to be an important part of specifying and procuring a drive. Some initial discussions we had with them that just last summer was, hey, those are expensive. So, well, we understand that. Drive's expensive as well. But the filtering, there's a cost to the filtering. But that equipment is beyond your transformer. That's their equipment. And it's their equipment that is
getting us close to the edge of the total harmonic distortion, as I reported in April.
But if they didn't want to do this on their own, the solution in general would be to charge customers for distortions caused by their own equipment into the line. Is that
The
normal
report,
procedure?
described kind of a brute force way of filtering these things.
Yeah.
It's not as clean where we put in some filters, they're not active filters, and it would,
Right.
and those would be things that it would be the district, if you purchased and installed these things, how you assessed that to your customers would be a district consideration. Do you say, hey, we're going to your lift, we see the smoking gun harmonics, and now we're putting this in there to correct it. And it's specifically because of this one location. I think an argument could be made that that would be related to that one service. But the cleanest, most efficient way to do it is there at the drive itself, where you can do active filtering. It actually filters better. It's probably less expensive than the brute force method.
Did they install any new filters this summer?
They installed chair 2, they installed a drive on the filter.
Should we, my recollection from the April thing was we would revisit this once summer was passed and Out Valley was online. Should we make this a standing agenda item?
Yeah, and our next, what we discussed previously on our next steps on this was to take our power quality meters and go in and find the smoking gun. That was, and we needed to do that under load, hence the delay until we start getting load.
So let's
we
put
will
it back
start
on the
making
agenda
this.
until we solve it. So, is that it?
Yeah.
Okay. Personnel, we haven't had a meeting since August. We have one scheduled, we pushed the one in November to December because Eric's going to be away for the November board meeting, which we rescheduled to the 8th from the 1st. But it sounds like we're going to have a call earlier than that. So item 11 is general discussion opportunity for board members to ask questions for clarification, provide information to staff, committee updates, request staff to report back on a matter, or to direct staff to place a matter on a subsequent agenda, aka general catch-all. Does anybody have anything they'd like to raise at this point? Nancy?
At some time, it's not an immediate issue, but I just have curiosity regarding the maintenance program on the fire department equipment that it utilizes. It does a lot of sitting, but when it's used, we need it.
To work.
Yeah.
Well, we can talk about that in the committee.
Sure. Request that on the agenda for our next committee meeting.
No problem.
That's in November.
Yeah, it's November
Okay.
7th.
Thank you.
I think that's it. Motion to adjourn? So moved? So moved. Thank you all. Thank you, Michael, Jill, Randy.
When did you change the